When that marriage contract was pulled from its hiding place, I was sorting through the official documents that had piled up for half a year in Shen Zhao's study. His study had never been open to me. For 8 long years I had only ground ink and boiled water for him in the outer chamber, never daring to touch even a single page of the books lining the shelves. Today, if not for the urgent military dispatch from Liangzhou and Shen Zhao being away on campaign, I would never have broken this rule. The soldier surnamed Song claimed the matter concerned grain and fodder logistics. I dared not delay, so I stepped into the inner secret compartment he had never allowed me to enter, concealed behind the antique display cabinet. I had meant to search for the military command tally of the Liangzhou army, but my fingers brushed a purple sandalwood box first. The unlocked copper clasp flicked open at my touch, and a neatly folded sheet of gold-flecked red paper slipped free, drifting down among the scattered military reports. The gold-embossed characters stood straight and proper. 47th year of Qianyuan, 8th month, eldest grandson of the Shen family's principal branch, Shen Zhao, and the legitimate eldest daughter of the Chen family's third branch, Chen Wanning, a harmonious alliance of 2 surnames, a union for 100 years. Wedding date set for the 9th day of the 9th month. My hand hovered above that red paper. My fingertips came within an inch of the gleaming line, yet it felt as though I had been burned. I jerked back as if scalded. Shen Zhao, Chen Wanning, the 9th day of the 9th month. Today was the 12th day of the 8th month. That meant in less than a month, the man who had shed blood on the frontier for 8 years, the man the entire city of soldiers and civilians, now called General Shen, would return to the capital to marry Miss Chen. And I, Gu Wantong, had known nothing. I read the marriage contract from beginning to end once more. Fine Anhui Xuan paper lay heavy in my palm, the vermilion seal still bright as fresh blood. The Chen family crest and the Shen family crest stood side by side at the bottom, dignified, distant, like 2 strangers forced to stand shoulder to shoulder, neither caring for the other. I suddenly wanted to laugh. 8 years ago, when Shen Zhao marched out of the capital, he had commanded barely 3,000 broken troops. Beyond Liangzhou's walls stretched an endless wasteland. The Hu cavalry raided every few days. Grain grew so scarce the men slaughtered their own horses for meat. Wounded soldiers lay in drafty tents with not even enough hemostatic powder to go around. It was I who pawned every piece of jewelry my mother had left me, trading it with Liangzhou's wealthy merchants for the first shipment of grain and medicine. It was I who led a handful of rough servant women who knew a little healing, staying awake day and night to brew decoctions, clean wounds, and pull arrowheads that had nearly rotted into bone. Under the name of General Shen's younger sister, I walked every village within 100 li of Liangzhou's, persuading common folk to donate grain, convincing villagers to enlist, and urging border people who had been terrorized by war to trust his army one more time. For 8 years I aged from 18 to 26. In the capital, girls my age already had children entering school. Yet here in this general's mansion I lived 8 years under the false title of younger sister, performing every duty a proper wife and mistress of the house should perform. Shen Zhao had never once spoken of marrying me. Every time he returned victorious, after drinking the sobering soup I brewed, he would take my hand and murmur, "Wantong, you've suffered." I always told myself he was helpless, buried in military affairs, with no time for personal feelings. I invented countless excuses for him, everyone reasonable, everyone making me willing to keep waiting. Until today. Until I saw another woman's name written on this marriage contract, the wedding date fixed for 28 days later. Adopted sister. As I uttered those 2 words aloud, my voice was so soft, it seemed afraid of waking someone. Yet the study held only me. Candlelight cast my solitary shadow against the wall. It turned out the title he had given me was never meant to be temporary. It was the final place he had arranged for me, a respectable yet distant identity that let me manage everything for him without ever forcing him to shoulder any formal responsibility. When outsiders spoke of Wantong, they said she was General Shen's younger sister, loyally overseeing the inner household. No one accused Shen Zhao of beginning what he would not finish. No one said I had disgraced myself. Because from start to finish, I was merely an adopted younger sister. But the soldiers and civilians of the entire city were not fools. The wounded men he had saved on the battlefield, the injured soldiers I had nursed back from death, the men who had eaten the porridge I cooked and worn the winter clothes I sewed, they had long regarded me as Shen Zhao's woman. They respected me because they believed Shen Zhao would one day give me a proper name. Half the army's steady morale came from their conviction that General Shen was a man of deep feeling and unwavering loyalty to the woman at his side. This was the true reason he had kept me on the frontier for 8 years, to help him gather the people's hearts. I slowly closed the purple sandalwood box and returned it to its place. The secret compartment in the antique shelf sealed shut without a trace, as if I had never entered, as if that marriage contract had never existed. But I had seen it. Every character was carved into my mind, the gold-embossed strokes sharp and clear. Big Sister Tang, a soft, slightly lazy voice drifted in from outside the door. She was the orphan girl I had brought back from Liangzhou City 5 years ago, the girl who had always kept the outer room of the study swept and tidy. She must have waited too long and finally called out, I answered, my voice so calm it surprised even me. When I pushed open the study door, Qingwei stood in the corridor with her hands respectfully at her sides, holding a cup of tea, probably fearing I would be thirsty after hunting for the military report. She glanced up, her eyes pausing on my face for a heartbeat before she quickly lowered her head. Big Sister Tang, your complexion looks poor. It's nothing. I took the cup from her. The warm porcelain against my palm finally felt real. I sipped the tea and walked toward my own courtyard at an even, unhurried pace, exactly as I always did. Qingwei followed a few steps, then asked softly, was something wrong in the general's study? My feet never slowed. This sharp little girl had clearly sensed something. I turned, smiled, and said, what could be wrong? Your general's study is spotless, couldn't hide even a mouse. Qingwei asked no more. Back in my West Wing courtyard, I sent her to fetch bathwater while I sat before the dressing table and began removing the pins from my hair in front of the bronze mirror. The woman reflected there wore a solemn expression. Fine lines already etched the corners of her eyes, marks left by 8 years of frontier wind and sand. I touched the corner of my eye and suddenly remembered the year I turned 18, when my mother saw me off at the ferry and said, Tanger is going to the capital. Take good care of yourself. But I never reached the capital. I met Shen Zhao on the road and followed him to Liangzhou instead. My mother never learned, until the day she died, that her daughter had gone not to the capital but to the frontier. The candle flame in the mirror wavered. I pulled out the last silver hairpin. My dark hair tumbled loose. I did not cry. I only felt that a place inside my chest had been hollow since the moment I saw the marriage contract, not pain, emptiness. As if someone had scooped out a ladleful of flesh and blood, leaving a black, gaping hole. Any gust of wind would chill straight through to the bone. 8 years of foolish devotion, traded for another woman's name on a single sheet of paper. I sank into the steaming bathwater, closed my eyes and thought for a long time. 28 days remained until the 9th day of the 9th month. Shen Zhao was still 200 li away at the front. When he returned, he would likely pack his belongings and head straight back to the capital to welcome his bride. How would he explain it to me then? Would he keep me here under the title of younger sister, letting me continue managing every trivial coming and going? Or would he graciously tell me the truth and allow me to leave with dignity? Either choice made my stomach turn. Late at night I lay awake, tossing and turning. Moonlight filtered through the window paper, laying a thin silver frost across the floor. I sat up, walked barefoot to the window and pushed it open a crack. In the backyard of the general's mansion stood an old locust tree, the one Shen Zhao and I had planted together 8 years ago. Back then, he had said the locust grew slowly but lived long. When the tree matured, we would be old as well. I had believed him. Every spring I fertilized and watered it, watching it grow from a bare sapling into the lush, leafy giant it was now. But the man who planted the tree had never intended to grow old beside me. I closed the window, returned to bed, and began thinking through everything, one matter at a time. I thought about how much I had given this general's mansion over 8 years. The first 3 years had been the hardest. Shen Zhao had just arrived in Liangzhou. His position was shaky. Court rations were constantly withheld. The WHO raided year after year. Soldiers fought on empty stomachs, while the wounded received no care. Morale teetered on the edge. I pawned the entire jewelry box my mother left me, using every coin to buy grain and medicine and sending it all to the camp without keeping a single tael. Among those pieces were jade bracelets handed down from my maternal grandmother, gold ingots my mother had kept at the bottom of her trunk, and several items I had known since childhood were meant for my dowry. I kept none. Later the grain problem eased, not because the court grew merciful, but because I negotiated with Liangzhou's great merchant houses under the general's mansion name, trading frontier furs and herbs for their grain. Those merchants were cunning. None would accept a loss. I talked until my lips cracked before securing the first shipment. After that, Liangzhou's military grain never ran short again. In the 5th year, the WHO besieged the city for 3 full months. Grain dwindled to nothing. The camp overflowed with wounded. The military doctors either fled or died until only Qingwei and I remained. I went 3 days and nights without sleep, dragging the most gravely injured soldiers back from death's door one by one. There was an old soldier named Zhao Lasi, whose intestines had spilled out. The army doctor said he was finished. I washed the wound with strong liquor, stitched it closed with needle and thread, and snatched him back from the king of hell by force. After he recovered, Zhao Laosi told everyone the young mistress had a bodhisattva's heart, and that General Shen possessing such a virtuous wife was the greatest blessing for the frontier troops. A virtuous wife, even an illiterate old soldier could see the role I played in this mansion. Yet Shen Zhao granted me only the title of adopted younger sister. I rolled over and buried my face in the pillow. But from beginning to end, Shen Zhao had never lied to me. He had never promised to marry me, never offered any formal title. He only smiled and called Wantong each time he returned, then looked at me with that gaze that could melt stone, as though everything was already understood without words. I had been trapped by that gaze for 8 years. Now I understood. The gaze had held nothing at all. I had simply spun myself a grand dream that lasted 8 years, only to have it torn apart by one sheet of marriage contract. As dawn approached, I finally drifted into a hazy sleep. My dream was empty pitch black, as though I had sunk into a deep well surrounded by icy water. The next morning, I rose as usual to manage affairs. Porridge simmered in the kitchen for the front courtyard servants. In the storeroom, last month's leftover herbs were being counted. Winter clothes drying in the backyard still needed turning. In 2 months, winter would arrive. The soldiers' cotton-padded clothes and quilts had to be prepared early. I had performed these tasks for 8 years. I knew every arrangement by heart, even with my eyes closed. Qingwei trotted behind me the entire way, handing me items and delivering messages, stealing glances at me whenever she thought I wasn't looking. She was worried. After I left Shen Zhao's study yesterday, my face must have looked truly terrible. Big Sister Tang, she finally burst out while we walked toward the storeroom. What's wrong? Is it something with the general? I cut her off without slowing. Go fetch Zhao Shen. I have questions for her. Auntie Zhao was an old retainer of the mansion, having served the Shen family since Shen Zhao's father's time. She knew the capital's Shen household inside and out. I had never inquired about Shen family matters before, believing it wasn't my place. Today was different. Zhao Shen arrived quickly, standing respectfully in the courtyard and addressing me as young mistress. I invited her to sit, poured tea, and asked straight out, what sort of family is the Chen clan in the capital? Her hand holding the cup paused. Surprise flickered in her cloudy eyes before vanishing behind the wrinkles of long practice. The Chen family, she began slowly, voice hoarse yet steady, is a century-old noble house. Their ancestors produced 3 Hanlin scholars and 2 ministers. Among the younger generation, there is even a vice minister at court. The legitimate eldest daughter of their 3rd branch, Chen Wanning, is 19 this year, raised deep in the inner chambers. She excels at zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. A famed talented lady of the capital, 19, 7 years younger than me. As for the marriage between the Chen and Shen families, Zhao Shen continued in the same even tone one might use to discuss the weather. It was arranged by the old masters of both houses while they still lived. The old general and old master Chen were Jinshi graduates the same year and close friends. They agreed that if their children could wed, the families would become in-laws. Both houses later bore sons, so the pact passed to the grandchildren. By now the betrothal has stood nearly 20 years. 20 years, I thought. That meant Shen Zhao was already the Chen family's prospective son-in-law at age 3. When he brought me back 8 years ago, he knew perfectly well he would one day return to marry that woman named Chen Wanning. He was never helpless. From the very start, he never intended to leave any place for me. Auntie Zhao seemed to read something in my face. She set her cup down and spoke with the gentle weight of experience. Young mistress, forgive an old woman's meddling, but in this world everything depends on matching doors and households. The Shen and Chen families are equals. Their union was inevitable. Your years of toil, the general surely keeps them in his heart. But formal titles. She left the sentence unfinished, yet the meaning was plain. Titles could not be earned through hardship alone. I came from a merchant family. When my mother married my father, she brought a substantial dowry and was considered well off in Zhongnan. Yet a merchant remained a merchant. In the eyes of the capital's great clans, we were no better than street peddlers. Shen Zhao's father was the hereditary general of the northern garrison, his mother, the legitimate daughter of a marquise. With such lineage, how could they allow a merchant's daughter through their gates as principal wife? She would not even qualify as a concubine. Even concubines had to come from respectable households. A woman like me, nameless, without status, who had followed a man 8 years, in their eyes I was probably beneath even an outer mistress. The words outer mistress rose from the depths of my heart, cold with humiliation. So in Shen Zhao's mind, I did not even deserve the rank of concubine. I was merely someone to manage his inner household, to bind the army's loyalty, and once he took a proper wife I could be dismissed at any moment like a used toy. My hand trembled around the cup, but I forced it still. Fingers tightened until the knuckles whitened. The tea inside rippled, then slowly settled. "Thank you, Zhao Shen," I said with a smile. "I understand." After she left, I sat alone and finished the now cold tea. Its bitterness suited my mood perfectly. Qingwei crept closer, voice small. "Big Sister Tong, are you leaving?" The little girl had guessed everything, as usual. I looked up at her 17, delicate-featured, 5 years at my side. She had learned to read, keep accounts, brew medicine, and bandage wounds. In this mansion she could now stand independently. If I left, Shen Zhao would not mistreat her. But I had to arrange her future properly. "Qingwei," I set the cup down, "fetch the household ledgers. I want to review this month's expenditures." When the books reached my hands, I flipped through them and discovered that last month Shen Zhao had sent a large sum of silver from the capital recorded as household expenses. Yet the amount was absurd. 50,000 taels. Zhao Shen had explained it was part of the betrothal gifts for the Chen family, temporarily charged to the mansion accounts, and to be reimbursed later. Using my ledgers to pay for his wedding gifts, I closed the books and began counting what I still possessed. These 8 years I had not left empty-handed. Among the jewelry I pawned, I had secretly kept a few pawn tickets and later redeemed them when I saved enough. Shen Zhao's monthly allowance always exceeded my needs. I saved the surplus. Festival gifts added more. Altogether it formed a respectable sum, enough to start fresh elsewhere and live comfortably for the rest of my life. The question was where. Returning to Jiangnan was impossible. Mother was gone. Father was weak. Uncles had long since divided the family business. I would only become a burden. The capital was worse Shin and Chen territory. My presence would only invite whispers and pointing fingers. Northward lay 12 cities in the Beijing circuit. Liangzhou was merely one. Another 200 li north sat the border city of Yunzhou remote, bitterly cold, yet busy with merchants well-informed and inconspicuous. I had no kin there, perfect for beginning again. That same night I had Qingwei deliver the storeroom keys to Zhao Shen, claiming recent poor health and a need to rest several days. She asked nothing further, assuming the marriage contract news had struck me hard and I needed time to recover. What she did not know was that from that night onward I began quietly packing. Jewelry went into an unremarkable old wooden box. Silver notes slipped into the hidden lining of my underclothes. A few everyday garments were folded at the bottom of the bundle. I worked neither slowly nor hastily. Every item was placed with care, as though preparing for the most ordinary journey. While helping, Qingwei's eyes suddenly reddened. "Big Sister Tong, take me with you." My hands stilled. I looked up. She bit her lip, tears brimming, fighting not to fall. "Why would you follow me?" I tucked the last garment away. "Once I leave, I doubt I'll ever have dealings with this mansion again. If you stay, at least you'll have steady food and shelter." "I don't care," she whispered, voice breaking. "Back outside Liangzhou City, when my mother died by the roadside and no one cared, you picked me up, Big Sister Tang. For this lifetime, I only recognize you as my mistress. Wherever you go, I go." I looked at her and felt a sudden sting in my nose. All these years I had bent myself in every direction, planning for everyone else. In the end, the person who truly held me in their heart was a little girl I had rescued from the roadside. "Very well," I said, "then we go together." On the Mid-Autumn Festival, the 15th day of the 8th month, Shen Zhao sent a letter via messenger. He expected to finish military matters by the 9th month and asked me to prepare his travel gear for the return to the capital. The handwriting was as sloppy as ever. At the end he had written, as always, "Wantong, you've worked hard." I folded the letter and placed it in the box where alongside every previous one. Then I wrote my own letter, not to Shen Zhao, but to an old acquaintance in Yunzhou City. His surname was Meng, an elderly doctor who ran a pharmacy. Years ago when Shen Zhao was wounded in the leg, Dr. Meng and I had set the bone together. After he returned to Yunzhou, we exchanged several letters. He occasionally forwarded medicinal herbs. In my letter I asked whether any idle residents existed in Yunzhou City that I might purchase to open a small clinic. I finished writing, gave the letter to Qingwei to send using one of the mansion's regular horses. No one would spare extra attention to a letter from the young mistress. Over 8 years I had handled countless military dispatches for Shen Zhao. After Qingwei left, I walked alone to the backyard and stood a long while beneath the old locust tree. Moonlight was bright, stretching the tree's shadow long and jagged across the ground. I reached out and touched the rough bark. My fingertips found a deep groove, the scar left by an arrow during the Hu siege in the 3rd year. The wound had healed, yet the mark remained forever, just like the marks these 8 years had left upon me. But I refused to carry them for the rest of my life. On the 16th day of the 8th month, I began auditing every account in the mansion. 8 years of ledgers filled an entire chest. Every entry was recorded with perfect clarity. I arranged them by year and, on the final page, wrote a summary in neat small script. Current silver reserves, grain, herbs, cloth and furs, plus income from estates and shops. No one asked me to do this. I did it anyway, because I wished to leave cleanly, with no handle for anyone to claim Gu Wantong had stolen General Shen's wealth. No chance for anyone to throw mud at my name. On the 18th day of the 8th month, Dr. Meng's reply arrived. He wrote that a small 2-courtyard residence stood in the western part of Yunzhou City. The front courtyard could serve as a clinic. The owner needed funds urgently. The price was modest, 300 taels would secure it. Yunzhou had grown much calmer these past 2 years, he added, with many traveling merchants. A clinic's business would not suffer. I read the letter, then burned it over a candle flame. From my hidden compartment I counted 3 100-tael silver notes, wrapped them in oil paper, and tucked them against my body. 21 days remained until the 9th day of the 9th month. Shen Zhao would likely turn to the mansion by month's end. I had to depart before then. That night I called Qingwei into my room and told her everything, not as discussion, but as settled plans. The route we would take, who to contact first in Yunzhou, where to conceal the silver, how to handle emergencies. I laid out every detail. When I finished, Qingwei sat silent a long while. Then she looked up and said, "Big Sister Tong, you should have left long ago." I stared at her, then laughed. Yes, I should have. On the night of the 19th day of the 8th month, I did not sleep. The bedroom candle burned until dawn. I spread every item I could find from these 8 years across the table: ledgers, letters, pawn tickets, jewelry, clothes, prescriptions, like reviewing the fragments of a long, absurd dream. First I picked up the old wooden box holding the jewelry my mother left. Jade bracelets, gold ingots, white jade willow branch earrings, several plain silver hairpins. These pieces had once been pawned at Liangzhou's largest shop for 3,000 taels, enough to feed Shen Zhao's army for the first 3 months. I had kept the pawn tickets. Later, when I saved enough silver, I redeemed them one by one. The shopkeeper had sighed when he recognized me. "Young mistress, why trouble yourself? These things were already gone. Why spend more to redeem them?" I had smiled and answered, "These are my mother's memories. I cannot lose them." Now I understood. What I truly should have redeemed was not these jewels. I slipped the jade bracelet onto my wrist and turned it twice. Green light glowed softly in the candle flame, cool against my skin like my mother's hand resting on the back of mine. The year she died, I had just turned 16. Lying on her sickbed, she clutched my hand and said, "Tanger, your mother has no great talent. I cannot leave you vast wealth, only these few things. Keep them safe. When you enter your husband's family one day, at least you will not be looked down upon." She never lived to see that day. When I followed Shen Zhao to Liangzhou, I kowtowed 3 times before her spirit tablet and said, "Your daughter is unfilial. I am following someone to the frontier." Back then I believed I had chosen a worthy path, that Shen Zhao was a man worth leaving home for. In the end, he had treated me only as a tool to steady the army's morale, never intending to grant me any formal standing. I returned the bracelet to the box, closed the lid, and placed it at the very bottom of my bundle. Next came the chest of ledgers, 8 years of accounts piled half a person high. I came from merchants. From childhood at my mother's side, every brushstroke had been precise. Shen Zhao never asked about mansion accounts. Whenever I offered to show him, he always smiled and said, "Wantong, I trust you completely." Of course he trusted me. A woman who required no title was managing his silver with perfect transparency, winning hearts for him, securing his rear. Who wouldn't feel at ease? I opened the 3rd year ledger. 42nd year of Qianyuan, 10th month, received 3,000 taels from the southern Liangzhou pawn shop, used to purchase 500 winter uniforms and 300 cotton quilts. Those 3,000 taels were the money from my mother's jewelry. Shen Zhao had known their source. He had taken my hand and promised, "Wantong, when the war ends and we return to the capital, I will repay you 100-fold, 1,000-fold. The war ended long ago. He never mentioned repayment. Yet those 500 uniforms and 300 quilts saved soldiers who would otherwise have frozen that winter. Zhao Laosi later told me the cold had been savage. Without the new quilts, at least 200 men would have died in camp. I did not regret the 3,000 taels. What I regretted was pouring my mother's memories into this place, only to receive in return a betrothal he had arranged behind my back. Further on lay the 5th year accounts. 44th year of Qianyuan, 3rd month. Hu siege of Liangzhou lasted 3 months. The entries were chaotic. Herbs flowed like water, Tenjin arriving one day and gone the next. I had locked myself in the pharmacy, with several servant women, brewing, grinding, compounding day and night, until the skin on my hands peeled away in layers. Between the pages, a yellowed slip of paper fell out names of wounded soldiers I had noted at the time. Zhao Laosi intestines spilled, 27 stitches. Lu Danyu left arm severed at shoulder, survived. Ma San arrow through chest, life saved but could never fight again. The paper was crumpled, dotted with old bloodstains. I did not know whose. I folded it and tucked it back inside. Did Shen Zhao know these things? Of course. After every major battle, he returned to the mansion, listened while I recounted casualties, nodded, and said, "You've worked hard." Then he went to his study to handle military business. I continued brewing medicine, bandaging, caring for those still in danger. He never once asked, "Wantong, are you tired? Wantong, are you afraid? Wantong, you're only a girl watching those opened bellies and spilled guts at night. Do you have nightmares?" Not once. I poured myself a cup of cold tea and drank it down. The chill slid into my throat and filled that empty place in my chest once more. Then came the letters. Over 8 years, Shen Zhao had written me many. Whenever he campaigned, he sent one every 10 days or half-month. Content was always the same. Frontline situation, grain sufficiency, instructions not to worry about mansion affairs. Always ending with "Wantong, you've worked hard." I unfolded every letter and arranged them chronologically. The earliest, written 8 years ago right after he reached Liangzhou, contained barely a dozen words. "Have entered the city. All well. Do not worry." He had only 3,000 remnant troops then. Not even enough silver for proper shelter. He and his men slept in the open. I found him an old residence in Liangzhou city and settled him there. Later letters grew longer. He described Liangzhou's heavy snow, the ferocity of Hu cavalry, the difficulty of particular battles. Sometimes he added personal lines. "Today in camp I drank a bowl of mutton soup, and suddenly remembered the porridge you brew at the mansion. When I return I must have a bowl." Back then such words had warmed my heart. Now every character stung. He remembered my porridge yet never thought to give me a legitimate place. He wrote, "Wantong, you've worked hard," yet never considered how light those 4 words felt to a woman who had waited 8 years. I folded the final letter, placed it with the others into the sturdy military report box, and pushed the box to the back of the table. On the 20th day of the 8th month I began formal preparations for departure. First, silver. I calculated. Monthly allowance 240 a year, 920 over 8 years. Plus festival gifts and miscellaneous silver I handled while managing affairs. I possessed roughly 4,000 taels. 3,000 came from redeeming my mother's jewelry, the rest from Shen Zhao. 4,000 taels would buy a small courtyard in Yunzhou, open a modest clinic, and let me live comfortably for the rest of my life. I was not helpless. After 8 years on the frontier, my medical skills, while not those of a proper physician, far surpassed any wandering doctor when it came to treating injuries, regulating constitutions, and identifying herbs. Yunzhou sat on the border with constant merchant traffic. Falls, fights, and wounds were everyday matters. My skills would earn a living easily. Next, luggage. I could take little, too much would draw notice. 2 changes of clothes, mother's jewelry, a few everyday herbs I had prepared, some organized prescriptions, plus dry rations and water for the road. That was all. Qingwei's bundle was even simpler. Efficient as always, she packed everything into one small cloth sack. Then the route. 2 official roads ran from Liangzhou to Yunzhou. The eastern route detoured through Yung City, 400 li, well-traveled, safe, but easy to be spotted. The western route crossed Qingyang Ridge outside Liangzhou City. After 30 li of mountain path, one reached Yunzhou territory, only 200 li, yet steep, remote, seldom traveled, and home to wild beasts. I chose the western route. I had walked Qingyang Ridge once before 5 years ago, when Dr. Meng came from Yunzhou to set Shen Zhao's leg. I accompanied him partway back. He had said the path, though dangerous, saw few travelers except herb gatherers. 5 years later the path should still exist. On the 21st day of the 8th month, Shen Zhao sent a second group of messengers. He would return to the mansion on the 28th and I should prepare his travel gear. The 28th, that meant I must leave by the 27th at latest. Traveling the western route, if swift, 3 days would reach Yunzhou. Departing the 25th, I would arrive exactly on the 28th. By the time Shen Zhao returned, I would already be inside Yunzhou city. Even if he sent pursuers, he would not know which direction to search. I told Qingwei the plan. She nodded and asked, "Big Sister Tong, when we leave, to whom should we give the mansion keys?" I thought a moment. Zhao Shen. He was an old Shen retainer. Though his words yesterday had chilled me, he was at least sensible. I would leave every key and every ledger with him, placed in the most obvious spot in the study. When Shen Zhao returned, he would see them at once. I wanted him to know that when I, Wantong, walked away, I took not a single needle or thread belonging to the Shen family. On the 22nd day of the 8th month, the weather turned cool. Liangzhou's first autumn wind rose, flinging sand against the window paper with a dry rustle. I spent the entire day outside, visiting the shops with which the mansion held long accounts: grain shop manager Zhou, medicine shop manager Sun, cloth shop manager Qian. I settled every outstanding payment in person. Every tael due was paid in full. Every contract was explained clearly. When manager Zhou received his silver, he could not help asking, "Young mistress, I heard General Shen returns next month to marry. Will the mansion's affairs now pass to the new madam, or will you continue overseeing them?" The words twisted like a small blade in my chest. I smiled. Naturally, they go to the new madam. As merely his younger sister, I have no right to keep acting as mistress of the house. Manager Zhou made a soft sound, eyes lingering on my face a moment. He seemed to notice something, then lowered his head and asked no more. When I stepped out of the grain shop, the sky had darkened. Streets were emptying. Autumn wind set shop signs flapping loudly. I stood at the entrance, looking at the street I had walked for 8 years, and felt everything become suddenly strange. I knew every shop, every manager. Even old Chen at the corner selling mutton soup knew me as the young mistress of General Shen's mansion. They respected me, believing I belonged to Shenzhou. But I did not. I was merely a tool used to gather hearts. I drew my cloak tighter and walked toward the mansion. Passing the mutton soup stall, old Chen was closing up. Seeing me, he called, "Young mistress, come have a bowl. Today's brew is especially thick." I smiled, waved, and kept walking. This was probably the last time old Chen would ever call me young mistress. On the 23rd day of the 8th month, I began moving belongings bit by bit to the small courtyard where Qingwei lived, small items each day so as not to attract notice. Zhao Shen asked once. I told her I was inventorying storeroom goods, discarding what must be discarded, storing what must be kept. She suspected nothing. Every autumn I performed similar tasks. That night I sat in my room and sharpened a small dagger Shen Zhao had once given me for protection. The edge had dulled. I worked the whetstone for nearly half an hour until the blade shone cold and keen. When Qingwei saw it, she jumped and asked its purpose. "Against wild beasts on the mountain road," I answered, sheathing it and tucking it into my belt at the waist. "If wolves appear, we won't be empty-handed." Qingwei pressed her lips together, turned to her own room, and spent the night sharpening her own dagger. On the 24th day of the 8th month, one day before departure, Shen Zhao sent another letter in the afternoon, saying he had finished military duties early and would return on the 27th. I need not prepare an elaborate welcoming feast. A few simple dishes would suffice. "Wantong, you've worked hard." Then one additional line, "When I return this time, there are matters I wish to discuss with you." Matters to discuss. I could imagine exactly what he planned to say. Nothing more than informing me of the betrothal, then declaring in that gentle yet unyielding tone, "Wantong, my marriage to Ms. Chen is unavoidable, but rest assured you will always have a place here. You remain my younger sister." Nothing changes. I would continue as his younger sister, continue managing his inner household, continue being the nameless, faceless shadow in the mansion, while Chen Wanning became his principal wife, moving into the home he had prepared, standing beside him at capital banquets, receiving every blessing. I placed the letter on the table and did not reply. For the first time in 8 years, I left one of Shen Zhao's letters unanswered. Qingwei saw the open letter but said nothing. She only silently helped me stuff the final items into the bundle. On the 25th day of the 8th month, I woke before dawn. Autumn in Liangzhou arrived late. Outside remained inky blackness, broken only by the distant tread of night patrol soldiers. I dressed, combed my hair into a simple braid, wore no pins, no powder. I studied myself in the bronze mirror. The face looking back was plain, the fine lines at her eyes softened by dim light, merely an ordinary traveler preparing for a journey. Qingwei waited outside, already packed, gray cloth bundle on her back, sharpened dagger at her waist. When she saw me, she called softly. "Big sis, go," I said. We left the mansion through the small west wing gate. I had pulled the inner bolt the night before. The moment the door opened, cold dawn wind rushed in, whipping my sleeves. I did not look back. Behind me stood the old locust tree. 8 years of ledgers, a house full of old things, and the approaching sound of Shen Zhao's footsteps. From this day forward, none of it concerned me. I did not look back because I feared that if I did, I would see the 18-year-old Gu Wantong standing beneath the locust tree, smiling at me with innocent, foolish hope. At the city gate, the guarding soldiers recognized me and greeted me cheerfully. "Young mistress, out so early?" I said I was going beyond the walls to gather a few medicinal herbs. They asked nothing more and waved us through. In Liangzhou City, Gu Wantong's face served better than any past token. This was the only dignity Shen Zhao had ever given me, and the fruit he had personally sown. After leaving the city, we walked roughly 3 li and reached the foot of Qingyang Ridge. The mountain path was still there, though more overgrown than 5 years earlier. The narrow trail of crushed stone lay half hidden by weeds. Shrubs on either side grew thick and tangled. Bird calls occasionally drifted from deep forest, making the emptiness feel even greater. I stood at the base a moment, then stepped onto the first stone. My footsteps echoed clear and resolute through the empty mountains. After half an hour, the sun rose behind the ridge. Golden light filtered through sparse canopy, warming the crushed stones and fallen leaves. Qingwei, walking behind, suddenly asked, "Big Sister Tang, what face do you think the general will make when he finds you gone?" My steps faltered. What expression would Shen Zhao wear? First rage, believing the mansion robbed. Then Zhao Shen would explain the young mistress had left of her own will, keys and ledgers complete and clearly handed over. He would stand stunned, silent, then flip through the ledgers I left and discover the marriage contract still resting untouched in its compartment. He would remember what sort of person Gu Wantong was, a woman who never spoke harshly, never threw tantrums, yet once decided never turned back. But what did it matter? He would still marry Miss Chen. The 9th day of the 9th wedding date would not shift by a single day because one woman departed. He might send searchers, yet whether they found me would not wound him to the bone. The wound that would truly cut deep would come when he realized no one remained in the rear to manage grain, treat wounded, and gather hearts. He would regret it. I spoke these thoughts to Qing, voice steady, as though recounting something unrelated to myself. Not because the person who left was me, I added, but because the person who left was the young mistress who managed his rear for 8 years. Qingwei walked in silence for a while, then suddenly laughed. "Big Sister Tang, you're truly ruthless." I laughed as well. Not ruthless. These 8 years simply ground a soft-hearted girl into what stands before you now. The path narrowed. Trees pressed closer. At noon we rested beside a small stream, ate dry rations, drank, then continued. Qingyang Ridge was difficult. In places, loose stones shifted and slid beneath our feet with a clatter. By late afternoon, we crested the ridge's highest point. Looking down, we glimpsed Yunzhou City's gray walls, crouched on the wasteland small as a chess piece on a board. That was General's mansion. No Shen Zhao, no false title of younger sister, no hollow respect and pity. Only a small courtyard of my own and a chance to begin again. I stood on the ridge, wind lifting my hair and the hem of my robe. Qingwei pointed at the distant city. "Big Sister Tang, is that our new home?" "Yes," I nodded. "That is our new home." The descent was far quicker than the climb. Steps followed the slope, light and swift, hearts lightening with them. By dusk we reached the small town at the mountain's foot and took a clean inn for the night. The innkeeper's wife, a woman in her 40s, eyed our bundles and asked our destination. "Yunzhou," I answered. "Yunzhou is fine," she chatted while pouring hot water. "These past years have grown much calmer. Business is easy there. My maiden home is in Yunzhou. I've heard several new shops opened recently, quite lively." I smiled, accepted the water and thanked her. That night, I lay in the inn bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the mountain wind howl against the window paper like distant weeping. Qingwei in the next room had likely already fallen asleep. Young hearts carry no burdens and sleep the moment heads touch pillows. I turned restlessly, mind filled with 8 years of broken memories. I remembered the first winter, Shen Zhao campaigning, me alone in the mansion on New Year's Eve. The kitchen had cooked dumplings. I let the servants eat first, then carried a bowl to the threshold and watched snow fill the sky, thinking of Mother's days when she made dumplings for me every New Year's Eve with her own hands. Shen Zhao was absent. I did not know whether he lived or died at the front. I sat in the snow the entire night. I remembered the 3rd autumn, so many wounded from the Hu siege that camp tents could not hold them. They lay on open ground. I knelt in mud bandaging the leg of a boy no older than 16 or 17. He trembled, lips bitten bloody. I coaxed him. "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid. Once bandaged it won't hurt." He survived but lost the leg and walked with a cane forever after. The day he left he kowtowed 3 times and said, "Young mistress, you are a good person. I will remember your kindness all my life." I remembered the 5th summer, Shen Zhao returning triumphant from a great victory. At the celebration banquet, wine bowled, he took my hand before all the generals and declared that in his entire life the person he had wronged most was Wantong. The generals immediately teased. When would the general marry the young mistress so they could drink wedding wine? Shen Zhao smiled without answering. For an instant something flashed across his face. I had not understood then. Now I did. That instant had been guilt. He had never intended to marry me. Those spoken words of regret were merely wine-fueled excuses to ease his conscience. I turned, pulling the quilt over my head. My eyes burned, yet no tears fell. What was there to cry for? Had I not already shed enough? Tears bitten into the quilt in the dead of night, tears shed before the mirror watching myself age day by day, tears swallowed alone after his coldness and ambiguity wounded me. Which drop had not been wasted? I did not grieve for him. I grieved for the 18-year-old girl I had been, that foolish child who believed love could fill every chasm in the world, who believed giving would be cherished, who believed waiting long enough would surely bring a happy ending. He did not know that the world's chasms were never things waiting alone could fill, especially the invisible gulf between great clans and merchant families, wide enough to swallow a woman's best 8 years. On the 26th day of the 8th month, we set out at first light. From the mountain-foot town to Yunzhou City lay half a day's easy travel across flat land. Along the way stretched wasteland and scattered fields. Liangzhou soil was poor, crops grew thin and sparse, a sight that made the heart uneasy. Qingwei, however, brimmed with curiosity, looking left and right the whole way, exclaiming for half the morning at the sight of a single wild rabbit. This girl had grown up inside Liangzhou City and had never seen the fresh sights of mountain and wilderness. Along the way she chattered nonstop. She didn't seem like someone fleeing hardship at all, more like a girl on an autumn outing. Watching her lively enthusiasm, I suddenly felt a weight lift from my heart. Well, we had already left. No point wearing a long face for anyone to see. At noon the city walls of Yunzhou finally appeared before us. Yunzhou was smaller than Liangzhou, its walls a notch lower. The gray bricks bore the marks of wind and rain. At the city gate a line of merchants waited to enter, driving camels and mules loaded with furs, wool, and medicinal herbs from the north, awaiting inspection by the guarding soldiers. I stood at the back of the queue. When my turn came, the soldier glanced at me, then at Qingwei, and routinely asked what the two of us were entering the city for. I handed over the travel permit I had prepared in advance in Liangzhou. My cousin runs a pharmacy in the western part of the city. I've come to help him. The soldier checked the names and official seal on the permit, asked no further questions, and waved us through. The moment we passed the city gate, the street scene of Yunzhou rushed toward us. Unlike Liangzhou, Yunzhou was small but lively. Both sides of the main street were lined with shops selling furs, herbs, food, sundries, brushes, and ink all squeezed together. The cries of vendors and the sounds of bargaining mingled into a noisy yet reassuring clamor. I was in no mood to wander. I headed straight west along the main street in search of the small courtyard Dr. Meng had mentioned in his letter. After walking for nearly half an hour, I found the place in a quiet alley in the western part of the city. It was a modest two-courtyard residence with gray tiles and white walls. The entrance wasn't large, but it looked tidy enough. A crooked-necked jujube tree grew by the gate, a wooden sign hanging from its trunk with the crooked characters, "This residence for sale." An old man sat dozing in the sun at the entrance. I stood there a while, surveying the surroundings. The alley wasn't deep. The main street lay just outside. A stick of incense's time south was Yunzhou's largest pharmacy, Dr. Meng's shop. A few households lived in the alley, all small merchants, by the look of them quiet and honest. A good place to open a shop. I woke the dozing old man and stated my purpose. He rubbed his eyes and looked at me, clearly surprised that the buyer was a young woman. He paused before reacting, then hurried inside to fetch the deed and keys. 300 taels of silver for a two-courtyard house. The front courtyard could be converted into a clinic, the rear for living quarters. The east wing even had an empty room perfect for Qingwei. The courtyard was a bit old, but with some cleaning it would serve. I paid the silver on the spot and signed the contract. When the old man took the silver notes, he carefully counted them twice with his dim eyes, then held them up to the sunlight to check the watermark before nodding in satisfaction and placing the keys in my hand. "This courtyard has been empty for half a year," he said while rolling up the deed. "If you can manage cleaning, you can move in the day after tomorrow." I clutched the keys. The cold iron pressed against my palm, heavy. This was my courtyard, not Shenjiao's property. No man's surname needed to be inscribed upon it. On the official deed, written in black ink on white paper, was the name Gu Wantang. After the old man left, I stood alone in the courtyard for a long time. A layer of fallen leaves covered the empty ground. Moss grew on the corner bricks. An old spiderweb still hung beneath the eaves. Everything needed to be tended from scratch: sweeping, cleaning, buying furniture, stocking medicinal herbs. Every single task was work. But I wasn't afraid. In this courtyard, I would no longer have to watch anyone's face, no longer manage anyone else's inner household, no longer wear the title of adopted younger sister while doing things that brought neither reward nor recognition. Qingwei came running out from the rear courtyard, beaming. "Big Sister Tong, there's a well in the back. The water is so clear." Looking at her sparkling eyes, I couldn't help smiling. "Good. Then let's draw some water first and wash our faces. On the 27th day of the 8th month, the first day we settled in Yunzhou City, Qingwei and I swept both front and rear courtyards, moved out the usable furniture and wiped it clean. Then bought bedding, pots, bowls, oil, salt, soy sauce, and vinegar from the street. After a full day's work, we finally made the 2 rooms in the rear courtyard livable. This day was also the day Shen Zhao returned to the Liangzhou general's mansion. I calculated the time. He would probably just be entering the mansion gates. Zhao Shen would greet him, take his cloak, and say, "General, the young mistress has left." He would be stunned. He would ask where I had gone. Zhao Shen would say he didn't know. When the young mistress left, she said nothing, only handed over the keys and ledgers completely and clearly. Nothing was missing from the storeroom. The accounts balanced to the last coin. Then he would walk into my room and see the empty space. See no note left on the table. See the box containing all the letters he had written over 8 years still sitting untouched in its original place. He might stand in silence for a long time. He might stand a while beneath the old locust tree. He might send soldiers outside the city to search, ask at every inn in Liangzhou City, even question the boatmen at the ferry whether they had seen me, but he would not find me. Because the place I was going was not on the road he had come from. That evening, Qingwei and I ate our first meal in Yunzhou in the cleaned rear courtyard, sesame cakes and sauced meat bought from the market, paired with tea chilled in well water. It was simple, yet I ate with particular relish. After finishing a sesame cake, Qingwei suddenly looked up and said, "Big Sister Tong, what should we name the medical hall next?" I held my teacup and thought for a moment. Not Guantong Medical Hall. Not Wantong Hall. Nothing that carries my name. Let's call it Qingwei Hall. Qingwei's eyes widened, her mouth falling open. It took her a long moment before she managed. "Big Sister Tong, aren't you trying to kill me with kindness?" I smiled and set the cup down, then looked up at the old locust tree overhead. I didn't know how many years it had lived. The night sky over Yunzhou was clear, stars densely scattered across the heavens like scattered silver fragments. "Qingwei," I said, "from today onward, neither of us owes the other anything." Life in Yunzhou proved steadier than I had imagined. Qingwei and I spent 3 days thoroughly cleaning both courtyards, then hired the carpenter from the alley's entrance to repair the doors, windows, and leaking eaves. The main hall of the front courtyard became the clinic. We built a medicine cabinet against the wall, placed a long examination table in the center, and added several benches for waiting patients. The 3 rooms in the rear courtyard, Qingwei and I shared one. The remaining one became the pharmacy for grinding herbs, compounding medicines, and preparing ointments. The signboard for Qingwei Hall was written by Scholar Zhou, who sold calligraphy and paintings next door. The old scholar's regular script was excellent. The 3 characters Qingwei Hall stood straight and proper, hanging above the door looking quite presentable. On opening day, I set off a string of firecrackers at the entrance. Several neighbors from the alley came out to watch the excitement, chattering and asking about the background of the new female doctor. I simply said I had come from the south. My family had fallen on hard times, and I had studied medicine for a few years, hoping to earn a living in Yunzhou. The neighbors looked me over with a mix of belief and doubt, but asked no more. In a border city like Yunzhou, people from all walks of life gathered. A single woman opening a medical hall was uncommon but not unheard of. Moreover, the consultation fees I charged were absurdly low. For ordinary injuries and illnesses, I took only a few copper coins. For the poor, I often charged nothing at all. For the first half-month, most patients were neighbors testing the new female doctor's skills. After I successfully treated several cases of headaches, fevers, sprains, and falls, Qingwei Hall's reputation slowly spread. On the 5th day of the 9th month, 4 days before Shen Zhao's grand wedding, I was taking the pulse of an old woman in the clinic, when I overheard 2 women waiting outside, lowering their voices in gossip. "Have you heard? General Shen is getting married in Liangzhou. He's marrying the legitimate daughter of the Chen family in the capital. The pomp is enormous." "General Shen? The one who guarded the northern frontier for 8 years, Shen Zhao? I remember his mansion had a young mistress, didn't it?" "What young mistress? He always claimed she was his younger sister." "Have you ever seen a younger sister manage her brother's household for 8 years? Clearly she was that woman." The speaker stopped mid-sentence, suddenly realizing the owner of the hall was surnamed Gu, and abruptly fell silent. She glanced toward me. I continued feeling the pulse calmly, writing several medicinal ingredients on the prescription slip without hurry. Then I looked up and smiled at the old lady. "Auntie, the cold has entered your bones. 3 doses of medicine and you'll be fine. Qingwei, go prepare the herbs for Auntie." Qingwei answered from the medicine cabinet, efficiently pulling open drawers and weighing the herbs. The talkative woman blushed, gave an awkward smile, and said no more. I didn't press. I handed her the prescription, collected the fee with a pleasant manner, and saw her out. After all the patients had left, Qingwei tidied the medicine cabinet while stealing glances at me, finally venturing carefully, "Big Sister Tang, what that person said earlier, it doesn't matter." I put away the pulse pillow, wiped the table with a damp cloth. Yunzhou is less than 200 li from Liangzhou. News was bound to arrive sooner or later. Besides, what they said is true. I was never anything to Shenzhou. Qingwei pressed her lips together, slammed the notebook in her hand onto the table, and huffed. "What do you mean never anything? Big Sister Tang, you did 8 years of work for him. Everyone in Liangzhou knew it. Now that the new wife has arrived, it all becomes nothing." "These people," I interrupted her, voice quiet but steady. "From now on in Yunzhou, don't mention Liangzhou matters. We're running a medical hall, not here to complain to others." The little girl froze, then lowered her head and muttered, "Understood." I wasn't forbidding her to speak for me. I knew this world never lacked people who stirred trouble. Rather than letting others point fingers behind my back, it was better to hide myself from the start. The people of Yunzhou City didn't need to know who Guan Tang had been before. They only needed to know that the female doctor of Qingwei Hall could treat illnesses. That was enough. On the 9th day of the 9th month double 9th festival, Yunzhou City followed the custom of climbing high. Street vendors selling chrysanthemum cakes and dogwood sprigs were noticeably more numerous than usual. I rose early and hung several sprigs of dogwood at the entrance, then steamed a steamer of double 9th cakes to share with the neighbors as a festival gesture. Qingwei stood at the doorway nibbling a cake, watching the people coming and going in the alley. She suddenly turned to look at me. I knew what she was thinking. Today was Shenzhou's wedding day. I said nothing, continuing to hang the last dogwood sprig on the doorframe. 9th day of the 9th month, 47th year of Qianyuan. Shenzhou and Chen Wanning's grand wedding. At this moment, the Liangzhou general's mansion was probably already draped in red silk, guests arriving at the gates. The Chen family's bridal sedan from the capital had likely departed 3 days earlier, musicians playing all the way into Liangzhou City. Shen Zhao stood at the entrance in a bright red wedding robe to welcome the bride. The entire city's soldiers and civilians lined the streets to watch. Everyone was saying General Shen and Miss Chen were a match made in heaven, perfectly matched in status. No one would mention the woman who had managed his rear for 8 years in the general's mansion. Even if someone did, it would only be a casual remark. I heard General Shen had a younger sister who once helped manage household affairs for a while. Now that the new wife has arrived, that younger sister has sensibly left on her own. Younger sister has left. I smiled, inserted the final dogwood sprig and turned back inside. On the 12th day of the 9th month, news from Liangzhou reached Yunzhou. It came from a traveling merchant passing through. While stopping at Qingwei Hall for water, after Qingwei poured him a drink, he began chattering about Liangzhou's news, the grand spectacle of General Shen's wedding. You wouldn't believe it. 3 days of flowing banquets in Liangzhou city commoners could eat as much as they wanted. The Chen family's dowry alone took 18 carriages, silks, gold and silver vessels, antiques, calligraphy and paintings. So dignified. The merchant took a big gulp of water and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. I heard the maids and old servants attending Miss Chen alone numbered 20 or 30, all brought from the capital. From now on, the general's mansion affairs will probably be decided by the new wife. I sat in the consultation chair, flipping through a prescription book, my fingers pausing on the page, expression unchanged. What about the young mistress who used to manage the general's mansion? The merchant asked himself. Before I could respond, Qingwei rolled her eyes behind the medicine cabinet, the scale in her hand clattering loudly. The merchant spread his hands. I heard from people in the general's mansion that the young mistress left before the general even returned. Some say General Shen dismissed her. Others say the new wife couldn't tolerate the former person and used underhanded means before even entering the door. But the official story from the mansion is that the young mistress was always the general's younger sister. And now that the general has married, it's only natural she should marry and start her own family. So she returned to her southern hometown. The scale in Qingwei's hand clattered onto the counter, startling the merchant into a flinch. I flipped the prescription to the next page without looking up. Qingwei, refill his water. The merchant seemed to sense something amiss. After finishing his water, he quickly took his leave. After he left, the hall fell quiet for a while. Qing stood motionless behind the medicine cabinet for a long moment before muttering, "How dare he say you returned to your hometown of your own accord?" I didn't answer because I suddenly understood something. Shen Zhao had told the outside world that I had returned to my southern hometown. Those 4 words, southern hometown, meant he would not send anyone to search for me. He had already arranged a respectable destination for me in public. Returning home in fine clothes, debts cleared on both sides. This explanation preserved his dignity and gave Chen Wanning an account. As for where I had actually gone or how I was living, he didn't care. Or perhaps he dared not care, because once he investigated my whereabouts, it would be tantamount to admitting he owed me something, and the upright, honorable image of General Shen could not tolerate such a debt. I stood up and walked to the doorway, looking at the crooked-necked jujube tree in the alley. A few half-green, half-red jujubes hung from its branches, spinning lazily in the autumn wind. "Qingwei," I said, "go gather the medicinal herbs drying in the rear courtyard. It looks like rain tonight." On the 16th day of the 9th month, news of Chen Wanning taking charge of the general's mansion spread like wildfire through Yunzhou. This time it wasn't a merchant but a young daughter-in-law from Liangzhou City visiting relatives. Her maiden home was in our alley, so naturally she stopped by Qingwei Hall while making rounds. "That young lady is truly beautiful," the daughter-in-law said, sitting on the bench in the consultation area, swinging her legs and cracking melon seeds. On the wedding day I squeezed into the crowd for a glimpse, fair and clean, like a fairy descended from a painting. General Shen standing beside her, such a perfect match. Qingwei yanked open a drawer in the medicine cabinet with a bang. I heard that before Miss Chen even arrived, her family's steward came to the general's mansion first and reorganized all the rules. The original account keeper, storeroom and kitchen staff were all replaced with people from the Chen family. The daughter-in-law lowered her voice, excitement of gossip in her tone. The cruelest part is they sealed all the account books the young mistress had handled, saying they needed to redo them. Think about it, new officials bring 3 fires. The new wife's first act upon entering was to erase every trace of her predecessor. I methodically performed acupuncture on an old man, heating the needle tip over flame before steadily inserting it into the acupoint. But strangely enough, the daughter-in-law continued after finishing her last handful of seeds and clapping her hands. General Shen's complexion has been rather ashen these past few days. I heard from people in the mansion that on the wedding day he drank wine, and somehow while drunk he called out Wantong. One of the new wife's old servants overheard it. Later the new wife asked who Wantong was. General Shen only said it was a former steward of the mansion who had already left. The new wife didn't press further, but her expression reportedly wasn't pleasant. With a sharp clack, Qingwei slammed the drawer shut, hard enough to make the entire cabinet shake. I glanced up at her, signaling with my eyes not to speak. Qingwei bit her lip and turned away, pretending to organize herbs. The daughter-in-law didn't notice these details. She chattered a while longer about Liangzhou gossip before brushing off her clothes and leaving. Once she was gone, Qingwei turned around, eyes red, and muttered through gritted teeth, "Serves them right." I didn't know whether she meant it served Shen Zhao right for drunkenly calling my name, or served Chen Wanning right for looking displeased, or both. But I knew none of these matters concerned me anymore. After the old man finished his acupuncture and left, only Qingwei and I remained in the hall. Qingwei had held it in all day and finally couldn't anymore. She flung the cloth in her hand onto the table, tears falling with soft pats. "Big Sister Tang, I don't understand. You did so much for him, and in the end he tells everyone you returned to your hometown on your own? The new wife seals all your account books the moment she arrives, as if everything you handled was dirty. How can they do that?" I took a handful of dried herbs from the cabinet and put them in my mouth, chewing until the bitter medicinal juice seeped out, clearing my head. "They can because they are a great aristocratic family." I spat out the chewed dregs, voice light. In the eyes of great families, a woman of merchant origin should leave of her own accord before the principal wife enters. That I made no fuss, demanded no title, was already the most dignified outcome. If I had stayed, it would have made everyone look bad. Qingwei's eyes widened. "Then you're just going to let it go like this, Big Sister Tang? Let it go?" I smiled, drew the sharply honed dagger from my waist, and placed it gently on the table. Settling accounts has never been about how fast, it's only about whether the time has come. Qingwei stared at the dagger as if she understood something, yet not quite. But she asked no more. She wiped her tears with her sleeve and turned to tidy the medicine cabinet. On the 20th day of the 9th month, Yunzhou had an autumn rain. It wasn't heavy, drizzling all day. The alley's soil turned soft and muddy, leaves from the jujube tree scattered across the ground. No patients came to the hall all morning. Qingwei and I sat in the pharmacy grinding herbs, pounding dried mugwort into paste to prepare moxa sticks for winter use. While grinding, Qingwei told me news she had heard at the market that morning. Trouble had arisen with grain and fodder logistics at the Liangzhou general's mansion. The new steward brought by the Chen family didn't understand frontier military affairs. He had routed several batches of already arranged grain and fodder incorrectly, causing 3 northwestern camps to go without food for 4 days. Soldiers at the front lines went hungry. When messengers were sent back to urge grain delivery, they discovered the mansion's account office in complete chaos. The new wife's old servants quarreled fiercely with the mansion's original retainers. I heard General Shen flew into a great rage. Qingwei pounded the mugwort with extra force, unable to suppress a note of schadenfreude in her voice. He summoned the new wife and demanded to know whether the people she brought could even manage accounts. The new wife cried and said she was a noble daughter who had never learned such coarse work. I didn't pause my hands, only smiled faintly. 8 years. I had managed the general's mansion's rear so thoroughly that he could fight at the front without distraction. He probably thought the grain logistics, herb purchases, and winter clothing preparations happened naturally, that anyone could do it just as well. Now he knew differently. But this was only the beginning. The frontier winter was fast approaching. Every winter, what the northern armies feared most wasn't battle but freezing to death or injury. Cotton clothes and quilts, medicinal reserves, placement of the wounded, every single matter could not be taken lightly. It had taken me a full 8 years to smooth out this entire process. Now the people brought by the Chen family knew nothing. Zhao Shen was too old to handle major affairs. Let the rear of the general's mansion descend into chaos. On the 25th day of the 9th month, Yunzhou City suddenly saw an influx of refugees from the Liangzhou direction. Not many scattered groups, mostly farming households from outside Liangzhou City. They said autumn had come too early this year, frost had fallen before the harvest. Combined with the change of steward at the general's mansion, the previous grain collection from outlying villages had been altered. The villagers had quarreled unhappily with the mansion, so some simply came to other cities to seek livelihoods. I set up a small stall at the entrance of Qingwei Hall, offering free consultations and medicine to these refugees while listening to news of Liangzhou. An old man from Liujia village outside Liangzhou City told me that in previous years before autumn, the young mistress, he caught himself using the old title, would send people to every village to pre-collect a portion of grain and fodder. The silver was fair. The villagers were happy to deal with the general's mansion. But this year, after the Chen Fli's people took over, the accounts fell into disorder. Silver payments were delayed. The quality and quantity of collected grain dropped sharply. That new wife understood none of this. The old man sighed. I heard she only sits in the rear courtyard playing the zither and drinking tea. She ignores everything outside. The stewards she brought only know how to flatter. When real trouble comes, they're useless. I prepared several doses of medicine for wind cold for the old man. As I saw him out, I suddenly felt the hollow place in my chest wasn't quite so empty anymore. It wasn't Shen Zhao's retribution that pleased me. His retribution was still far from satisfying. I had only confirmed one thing. These 8 years of effort could not be casually erased. The operation of the general's mansion's rear was not something just anyone could take over. My value had never been granted by Shen Zhao. It was something I had earned myself. On the 30th day of the 9th month, Chen Wanning sent people to Yunzhou. 2 middle-aged servant women arrived, asking directions until they found Qingwei Hall. They lingered at the entrance for a while before hesitantly stepping inside. I was applying medicine to a young man who had twisted his ankle. I glanced up and knew at once where they came from. The fabric and craftsmanship of their clothes were the style favored by servants of capital aristocratic families. No one in the north dressed so meticulously. Esteemed young mistress. The lead servant woman bowed, her tone polite but not respectful, carrying a businesslike air. Our Madame Chen has heard of your excellent medical skills and wishes to invite you back to the Liangzhou general's mansion to help manage the wounded soldiers' affairs. Qingwei gave a cold laugh beside me. I didn't look up. I finished dressing the young man's wound, carefully wrapped it with cloth strips several times, then told him, go home and walk less. Come back in 3 days to change the dressing. After the young man left, I stood, calmly wiped my hands and regarded the 2 servant women. Your madam? I asked. The servant woman straightened, a hint of arrogance in her voice. General Shen's principal wife, the legitimate eldest daughter of the Chen family, Madame Chen. Gu young mistress once served in the general's mansion. You must know General Shen's prestige. Now mansion affairs are complicated. Madam alone cannot manage everything. Hearing the former young mistress possesses outstanding medical skills, she specifically ordered us to come and extend this invitation. I draped the hand towel over the basin stand and turned toward the medicine cabinet. However, I haven't served in the general's mansion for a long time. Qingwei Hall has many patients. I cannot leave. The servant woman clearly hadn't expected refusal. She paused, then her expression shifted slightly. Young mistress, you must think carefully. Our madam is giving you this opportunity only because you once saved lives for the general's mansion. A single woman like you running a small clinic in a border city. How much money can you make? Return to the general's mansion and madam will not treat you poorly. I smiled. Not treat me poorly? Chen Wanning probably wants to bring me back so I can continue working for the general's mansion. But before, at least I had the title of younger sister. Now, if I return, what would I be? A servant to be summoned and dismissed at the principal wife's whim? I spoke without the slightest hesitation. I said I won't go. I took several medicinal herbs from the drawer and arranged them on the counter, each word clear. Qingwei, see the guests out. Qingwei immediately emerged from behind the medicine cabinet, her face clearly reading, leave quickly, pushing the hall door wide open. The two servant women exchanged glances, faces alternating between pale and flushed. The lead one seemed about to speak, but was pulled back by her companion's sleeve. They stood a moment longer. Seeing I had no intention of engaging further, they turned and left with stiff steps. Qingsui slammed the door shut, leaned against it, and let out a long breath. Then she gave me a big thumbs up. I shook my head and continued sorting herbs. Chen Wanning sending servants to invite me wasn't because she was magnanimous. It was because she had finally realized the general's mansion lacked anyone who could stabilize the rear. She wanted to bring me back to continue slaving for her husband, and conveniently keep me under her eye to prevent this former person from becoming a potential threat outside. Her calculations were precise. But she forgot one thing. I, Guantang, was no longer the woman who would soften at Shenjiao's smile. On the 4th day of the 10th month, the first batch of winter military supply lists arrived from Liangzhou. This time it wasn't Chen Wanning's people but Shenjiao's personal soldier Song, who had followed Shenjiao for 6 years. Years ago on the battlefield he had broken 3 ribs. I had personally set them. The moment he stepped through Qingwei Hall's door and saw me sitting in the consultation chair, his eyes immediately reddened. Young Mistress Big Sister Tong. I stood and took 2 steps forward. Song, why have you come? Soldier Song placed his saber on the table and pulled a letter from his chest. The envelope bore the words to Guantang personally in sloppy, urgent handwriting. I recognized it as Shenjiao's. I didn't take it. Young Mistress. Soldier Song's voice changed with urgency when I didn't accept the letter. Please just look at it. The general took half a day to write this letter. When I left the mansion, he even instructed me to deliver it into your hands no matter what. I glanced at the letter, then finally accepted it. I didn't open it immediately. I had Qingwei pour water for the soldier and seat him in the consultation area to rest, then took the letter to the rear courtyard. Sitting on the stone steps, I tore open the seal, 6 pages. Shenjiao rarely wrote such long letters. The first page was entirely military matters. Urgent grain shortage at the front. The Chen family steward having routed a batch of grain incorrectly, causing 3 northwestern camps to go without food for 4 days. Winter clothing preparations were over 1,000 sets short compared to previous years. Soldiers' complaints were widespread. The medical camp had accumulated over 100 wounded. Military doctors were shorthanded. The doctors brought by Chen Wanning only understood internal medicine and couldn't handle blade and sword injuries. The second page began describing his situation. Chen Wanning, raised in luxury since childhood, understood nothing of frontier hardships. The old servants she brought stirred trouble in the mansion daily, driving away several long-serving retainers. Several including Zhao Shen had retired and returned to the capital, leaving only one sentence. Let him think carefully on his own. He had drunk wine and slept 3 nights alone in the study. Upon waking each morning he habitually thought of calling Wan Tong, only to open his eyes and remember I had gone. The third page finally addressed me directly. Wan Tong, I know you resent me, but the betrothal with the Chen family was arranged by my grandfather. I had no choice. Keeping you on the frontier for 8 years was not to use you. After you left, I haven't slept well a single night. Remembering everything you did these years, each matter pierces my heart like a needle. If you return, I'll give you whatever you want. Had no choice. When I saw those 4 words, I suddenly laughed aloud. A betrothal set at age 3. Had he not known before he left the capital at 20? When he brought me back, had he not known? When he had me manage grain, treat wounded, and gather loyalty, had he not known there was still a Miss Chen in the capital waiting for him to return and marry? He knew. He simply hadn't mentioned it when he needed me. Now that he needed the Chen family, he married her. From beginning to end, he treated everyone as chess pieces on a board. Chen Wanning was the piece to maintain aristocratic connections. I was the piece to stabilize the frontier rear. 2 pieces, each useful. He was reluctant to discard either, but neither was what he truly cared about. I folded the letter without reading the remaining 3 pages. When I re-entered the clinic, Soldier Song immediately stood, looking at me with full expectation. Brother Song, I placed the letter on the table and pushed it back toward him. Take this letter back. Convey one message to General Shen for me. Soldier Song froze. Please speak. Tell him the original procedures for Liangzhou's military supply logistics are in the hidden compartment on the final page of the ledgers. Follow them, and nothing will go wrong. The purchasing channels for winter clothing are the same as previous years. Go to Manager Zhou at Zhouji Cloth Shop in Liangzhou City. He has last year's accounts and measurements. The external injury prescriptions needed in the medical camp are in the second drawer of the pharmacy. Have the military doctors compound according to the formulas. Soldier Song listened in stunned silence. When I finished, he cautiously asked, "Then, you won't return?" "Return for what?" I pushed the letter toward him again. "I've already left." Soldier Song stood in the clinic, lips trembling for a long while, but ultimately didn't dare persuade further. After following Shen Zhao for 6 years, he had seen my temperament and knew that once this woman made a decision, 10 oxen couldn't pull her back. He picked up the returned letter, solemnly clasped his fists in salute, then turned and walked out of Qingwei Hall. The October wind rattled the clinic's door panels. I watched Soldier Song's figure disappear at the alley's entrance, then turned and sat back in the consultation chair. Qingwei came over and asked softly, "Big Sister Tong, what did he write in the letter?" "He wrote that he had no choice." I said it, and Qingwei immediately spat without hesitation. I was amused by her pa. After laughing, I discovered my heart truly held no ripple. The words Shen Zhao had written. If it had been the old me, I would probably have immediately packed my bundle and followed him back, distressed that he couldn't eat or sleep well, distressed that he suffered on the frontier. But now, reading them, I felt only numbness, as though reading a story completely unrelated to me. He wanted me back not because he missed me, not because he loved me, but because his rear had fallen into chaos. He needed someone to clean up the mess. That was all. The letter I had returned should already be on its way back to Liangzhou. What expression would Shen Zhao wear when he received it? I didn't know, and I didn't particularly want to know. On the 10th day of the 10th month, Yunzhou's first snow fell. It wasn't heavy. Fine snowflakes were swept by the north wind, pattering against the window paper all night. The next morning, when I pushed open the clinic door, the alley was already covered in a thin white layer. Several blood-red streaks hung from the bare branches of the crooked-necked jujube tree. The air was cold enough to sting the lungs. Winter in the north arrived early. October had barely begun, and it was already this cold. It would only grow harsher in the 11th and 12th months. I had spent 8 years in Liangzhou, and knew all too well what frontier winter looked like: great winds and heavy snow sealing mountains and roads, grain unable to enter, wounded unable to leave. Every year people froze to death or suffered frostbite. Every year medicine and doctors were scarce. At this time in previous years, I would already have been busy day and night in the general's mansion drafting winter clothing patterns, stockpiling medicinal herbs, purchasing charcoal, preparing cold-dispelling decoctions for each camp. Every single matter had to be settled within a month. One day late meant another batch of people suffering from the cold. Back then, I often worked until the latter half of the night, bent over ledgers drawing and calculating while the meal Qingwei brought cooled, was reheated, cooled again. This year, none of it concerned me. But I knew clearly. Not concerning me didn't mean I didn't care. In the Liangzhou military camps, those old soldiers Zhao Laosi, Liu Danyu, and the several young soldiers who suffered frostbite every year, did they have enough winter clothes? Was the external injury medicine in the medical camp sufficient? Did the doctors Chen Wanning, brought from the capital, know that the most common ailment in northern winter wasn't wind cold but inflammation and suppuration after frostbite, which if untreated would rot an entire leg? I pressed these thoughts down, donned my cloak and went out. Today I was going to visit an old patient in the northern part of the city, an elderly lady surnamed Shu, over 70, who had suffered from rheumatism in her knees for years. When the weather turned cold, the pain kept her bedridden. While in Liangzhou, I had learned a set of moxibustion techniques from an old military doctor specifically for treating old cold legs caused by cold damp invasion. After half a month of treatment for Auntie Shu, she had improved considerably. After crossing 2 alleys, I noticed noticeably more people on the streets than usual. On closer look, most were refugee families dragging children and carrying bundles, pushing carts, huddled in groups by the roadside, snow dusting their bodies, faces gray-white as if frostbitten. Have you heard? Liangzhou is going to be chaotic this winter, the early morning snack seller Auntie Wu said while flipping oil cakes, gossiping with the woman beside her. Another batch of refugees just arrived, saying the general's mansion's grain distribution has doubled compared to last year. Those who can't pay grain have to use their fields as collateral. That can't be right. Wasn't everything fine in previous years? The woman beside her asked, mouth full. I remember the person managing grain in Liangzhou was a female steward, wasn't she? She handled it quite smoothly. You mean the young mistress, right? She left. Auntie Wu lowered her voice, excitement of gossip in her tone. General Shen married the Chen family's young lady from the capital. The young mistress couldn't stay. I heard she left on her own. After the new wife took over, she changed all the previous procedures. This year's grain distribution is being handled by the Chen family's stewards. What do those stewards understand about the frontier? They only know how to collect rent the way capital great families do. They've nearly driven the outlying villagers mad. I walked past them without slowing, yet heard every word clearly. As expected, trouble had arisen. In previous years, I had never worried about grain distribution. I would visit every village in advance, negotiate face-to-face with the villagers, setting amounts according to that year's harvest, more in abundant years, less in lean ones. During major disasters, I even took silver from the mansion's storeroom to buy grain and subsidize them. Although the villagers complained about grain distribution, they could still get by and had no need to flee with their families. But now, the Chen family stewards only recognized the numbers on paper, caring nothing for the villagers' survival. How was this different from killing the goose that laid the golden eggs? I suppressed the anger in my heart and turned into the small alley where Auntie Sue lived. Auntie Sue lived at the deepest end of the alley in a low earthen house. Half the thatched roof had collapsed under the weight of snow. A half-dead speckled chicken huddled shivering in the corner by the wall. I knocked on the door. After a long while, a weak voice answered from inside. It's Gu the doctor from Qingwei Hall. The door opened a crack. Auntie Sue, leaning on a crooked wooden staff, saw me and immediately broke into a wrinkled smile. Young mistress, on such a snowy day you still come to see this old woman. I feel bad. It's on the way. I helped her sit back on the bed and place the moxa sticks and ointment I carried on the table. Auntie, after I finish with you, I still need to go to the southern part of the city. Several new refugees arrived there, saying they're from Liujia village in Liangzhou. Their children are sick from the cold. Auntie Sue sighed. While rolling up her trouser leg for me to examine her knee, she chattered. Liangzhou is going to be chaotic this year. My youngest son works as a laborer in Liangzhou City. A few days ago, he suddenly sent word back saying the general's mansion has become a complete mess inside. The new wife's old servants and the original retainers quarrel every day. General Shen was so angry he smashed several cups. In the end, he had both sides beaten with boards before it stopped. I didn't respond. I lit a moxa stick and held it 2 inches above her knee, slowly circling to warm the area. The bitter fragrance of mugwort slowly filled the room. Auntie Shu sucked in air through her teeth but didn't stop talking. My youngest also said that the day after General Shen married, he moved his study from the main courtyard to the east wing, saying he would sleep separately from the new wife. Everyone in the mansion is guessing the new wife must have quarreled with the general over the young mistress matter. Enough, Auntie, I interrupted gently. Your knee will be nearly healed after 3 more sessions. I'll have Qingwei send the ointment over later. Apply it morning and evening. When I left Auntie Sue's house, the snow had stopped. Half a stick of incense later, the sun revealed a few pale rays through the clouds, making the snow on the ground glitter blindingly. I tightened my cloak and walked towards the southern part of the city through the half-melted snow. In the abandoned city god temple in the southern district, refugees from the Liangzhou direction were packed tightly. The temple door had long since disappeared. The dilapidated structure leaked wind from all sides. Dozens of people huddled together on piles of dry straw, old people coughing, children crying, a chaotic mix. In one corner, several half-grown children gathered around a broken iron pot trying to light a fire. The scavenged firewood was damp. Black smoke rose, making everyone in the room rub their eyes. In the nearly 2 months I had lived in Yunzhou City, I had never seen so many refugees. Dr. Gu has come. Someone recognized me and called hoarsely. Several anxious-faced women immediately surrounded me, speaking all at once. My child has had a fever for 2 days. My mother-in-law's asthma is acting up badly. The head of the family has frostbite and can't walk. I listened to each one, examined everyone who needed it, distributed the medicinal herbs I had brought according to the number of people, and taught 2 young daughters-in-law who still had strength how to brew ginger soup and treat frostbite wounds. By the time I finished a round, the sky had darkened. Snow began falling again outside the temple. I squatted by the threshold, warming my hands over the fire basin, turning them repeatedly. My fingers were so stiff from cold I could barely hold a needle steady. A young woman holding a child sat down beside me and called softly, "Young mistress." I turned to look at her, around 20, ordinary appearance, holding a 2-year-old child, whose face was flushed from fever. After taking medicine, the child had fallen into a drowsy sleep. Are you from Yunzhou originally? I asked. No. The young woman shook her head, her voice nearly swallowed by the wind outside. We're from Liujia village in Liangzhou. We were getting by before. After paying grain each year, we still had some surplus. But this year, after the new steward took over, grain per moo more than doubled. My husband went to the general's mansion to reason with them, but was driven out before even entering the gate and kicked twice by the guards. He buried his head, voice beginning to tremble. Later, the Chen family steward said if we couldn't pay grain, we could mortgage the land deed to the general's mansion and redeem it after the next harvest. My husband refused. They brought soldiers and emptied the entire granary in front of the whole village. My mother-in-law was so anxious she fell ill on the spot and didn't survive. Several sparks flew from the fire basin and landed on my cloak. I didn't brush them off. What about General Shen? I asked. Didn't he intervene? The woman was silent a moment, then pulled a smile uglier than crying. General Shen is at the front lines. He's at the front lines, she repeated. Tears suddenly fell. But those stewards aren't outsiders. They were brought by his wife's family. He either can't manage them or doesn't want to. I don't know. I only know my mother-in-law is dead, our land is gone, and my husband is still lying in bed, his left foot swollen like a steamed bun. If it doesn't get better, I'm afraid we won't be able to keep it. I stood and patted her shoulder, then took the emergency golden wound ointment from the bottom of my medicine box and pressed it into her hand. Apply it twice a day. When changing the dressing, use strong liquor, don't skimp. Tomorrow I'll have the hall send a batch of new medicine. You can take some back then. The young woman clutched the medicine bottle, lips trembling for a long while, then suddenly grabbed my sleeve. Young mistress, take us to find General Shen. You're from the general's mansion, he'll listen to. I'm not from the general's mansion. I gently withdrew my sleeve from her grasp, voice even. The current general's mansion is ruled by the Chen family. The woman stared at me, the light in her eyes dimming bit by bit. When I left the city god temple, snow had already reached my ankles. The alley was empty, windows on both sides were tightly shut. Occasional dog barks echoed in the empty snow, sounding especially desolate. I walked alone through the snow, each step crunching loudly. The matter of Liujia village weighed heavily on my heart. That young woman's experience was not unique. Grain distribution doubled. Inability to pay meant mortgaging land. Going to reason meant being driven out and beaten. This wasn't preparing military supplies. This was devouring the countryside. But Shenzhou either couldn't manage it or currently lacked the power to. The rear was controlled by the Chen family's people. If he stood up for a few villagers, it would be tantamount to slapping the Chen family's face. And he had just married Miss Chen. He couldn't afford to offend the Chen family. This was the rule of great aristocratic families. The life and death of commoners, merchants, and villagers had never counted in their eyes. Shen Zhao was perhaps not a bad person, but he had chosen to be part of this system. He married Chen Wanning and had to accept everything the Chen family brought, including those stewards who treated people as less than human. I turned it over in my mind for a long time. As I neared Qingwei Hall, I suddenly stopped at the alley entrance. The lantern at Qingwei Hall's entrance was still lit. Snowlight reflected in the warm yellow glow. Qingwei stood at the doorway holding a lantern, looking around. When she saw my figure, she ran over and draped a thick cotton-padded jacket over my shoulders. Big Sister Tang, you must be freezing. The porridge is hot inside, come in quickly. I followed her through the door. The moment warm air hit my face, my nose suddenly stung. Not from grievance, a feeling I couldn't quite name. Back in the general's mansion, when I stayed up until midnight waiting for Shen Zhao to return, no one had ever waited at the door with a cotton jacket for me. Another half-month passed. It was already the beginning of the 12th month. After the snow month in Yunzhou, a large portion of the refugees in the city god temple had fallen ill. Every day before dawn, Qingwei and I ran over there. Qingwei Hall's medicine cabinet was nearly emptied. I asked manager Sun of the medicine shop to help procure a batch of medicinal herbs from the south, pressing the price again and again, but the expenditure was still terrifyingly large. Of the more than 4,000 taels I had saved over 8 years, 300 went to buy the house, nearly 200 to open the hall and furnish it. These past months treating refugees and giving away medicine had spent money like flowing water. Qingwei had calculated the accounts for me. At this rate, we wouldn't last until spring before going broke. Big Sister Tang, we can't keep going like this. Qingwei stood before me holding the account book, brows knitted. More and more refugees, our silver getting less and less. We can't throw ourselves into it too. I had a plan in mind. I opened the prescription notebook I kept and found a blank page, writing down the name of a medicinal herb merchant. I'll think of another way. The way had already occurred to me. Over these 2 months, I had discovered that not only Liangzhou had refugees, Yunzhou locals also had many injured by soldiers. Frontier skirmishes had never completely stopped. Small-scale raids happened every year, just not alarming the court. Those commoners wounded by blades and swords, those merchants injured by stray arrows. They couldn't get appointments with proper military doctors and couldn't afford the big clinics in the city. In the end, they could only endure their wounds and wait for death. They needed someone to care for them, and many among them were willing to pay for it. Not great wealth, but 3 or 5 strings of cash in consultation fees those small merchants and traveling traders could still afford. My plan was simple. Qingwei Hall would charge consultation fees to outsiders, the amount depending on the person. The wealthy paid more, the poor paid less or nothing. Refugee treatment would not stop, but no longer entirely free. Those who could help by brewing medicine or cleaning the hall could offset fees. This way, the hall's income could at least maintain the turnover of medicinal herbs and prevent us from sitting and eating through our savings. Qingwei's eyes lit up when she heard this. The girl's mind worked quickly. She immediately added, "We can also make more ready-made pills and ointments to sell. Big Sister Tang, the moxa sticks and frostbite ointment you prepare, many people have asked about them. Once we make them, we can set up a stall at the hall entrance. They'll definitely sell." She acted the moment she thought of it. The next day she ran to the market, bought small porcelain bottles and oil paper, returned and filled the frostbite ointment into the bottles, sealed them with red paper, and placed them on the shelf at the hall entrance. At first only a few scattered people bought. Within less than 10 days, word spread. Qingwei Hall's frostbite ointment worked wonders after application, far more effective than what other medicine shops in the city sold. Not only that, I also prepared batches of golden wound powder and cold dispelling pills, having Qingwei deliver them to several large merchant houses in Yunzhou City for consignment profits split 30-70. The shop managers were naturally delighted. They could earn a share without investing capital and incidentally bring customers to our door. Why wouldn't they agree? On the 8th day of the 12th month, I calculated the accounts. Last month's clinic income plus consignment silver, after deducting costs and refugee expenses, actually showed a surplus of over 20 taels. This was the first time since arriving in Yunzhou that I saw a surplus in the account. Qingwei was so happy she spun several circles in the pharmacy, insisting we eat dumplings that evening to celebrate. "We can eat dumplings," I said, closing the account book, a smile tugging at my lips as well. "But today we must first finish brewing the medicine porridge for that batch of refugees at the city god temple. I see there are still 30-odd people who haven't received any yet." "Big Sister Tang, you really can't sit still," Qingwei grumbled as she entered the pharmacy. "The moment we have money, you want to spend it all." She was right, but I wasn't restless because I couldn't sit still. I understood the suffering of these poor commoners far too well. At 16, when my family fell into ruin, I had wandered with my mother, begging at every relative's door, tasting slammed gates and cold stares. I knew how little a single life was worth in the face of gold and power. Now that I possessed the skill, I would save one more if I could. That evening, we were brewing medicinal porridge in the pharmacy when urgent hoofbeats suddenly echoed from outside. The sound halted in the alley, followed by frantic pounding on the clinic door so forceful the panels trembled. Qingwei set down her ladle and went to open it. The instant she drew the bolt, a gust of cold wind laced with snowflakes rushed inside. Outside stood 7 or 8 soldiers in dark armor, thick snow coating their armor, faces stiff with cold, breath condensing into white clouds in the biting wind. The lead soldier was tall and broad-shouldered, thick-browed and square-faced. Qingwei recognized him at a glance and called back to me. "Big Sister Tang, it's Soldier Song." Soldier Song, the very man who had come last month to deliver Shen Zhao's letter and taken my refusal back with him. He had returned. I set down my medicinal ladle, brushed the herb residue from my hands, and walked to the clinic entrance. The moment Soldier Song saw me, he dropped to one knee. His armor struck the threshold with a dull thud. The soldiers behind him followed suit, a clatter of plates ringing out. "Young mistress, we beg you to return to Liangzhou." His voice was hoarse, lips cracked and bleeding as though he had ridden hard for days without pausing for water. The general is wounded." My fingers tightened on the doorframe. How is he wounded? Half a month ago, the Hu launched a surprise attack on the western camp. The general led troops in pursuit and fell into an ambush. Soldier Song lifted his head, eyes bloodshot. The arrowhead had barbs. The military doctors dared not extract it, saying it had damaged tendons and veins. "The wound has festered. He has burned with fever for 3 days and nights," muttering nonsense. He lowered himself further, forehead nearly touching the snow-dusted threshold. Madame Chen summoned 3 doctors from Liangzhou City. All said the arrowhead could not be removed. They told us to prepare for the worst. Young mistress, I know you hold resentment in your heart, but for the sake of 8 years, please, just this once, for the general. Snowflakes swirled through the open door on the wind, melting into dark patches at my feet. Shenjiao was wounded, barbed arrowhead, infected wound, high fever that would not break. I had served as army physician in Liangzhou for 8 years and treated countless blade wounds. The Hu arrows of the northern frontier were indeed vicious. Once the barbs hooked into bone and tendon, forcible removal would tear the main vessels. Leaving it in would cause slow rot and death. Ordinary doctors in Liangzhou City truly could not handle such an injury. But what did that have to do with me? Brother Song, I withdrew my hand from the doorframe, voice steady. Liangzhou City has military doctors. Madame Chen has summoned physicians as well. Whether I go or not makes little difference. It does. Soldier Song jerked his head up, voice nearly a roar. Those doctors won't even touch the wound. They say only you, young mistress, only you can extract this kind of arrowhead. Back then Zhao Laoxi's intestines spilled out and you sewed them back in. The general's wound is nothing to you. You must have a way. Qingwei stood by the door, still clutching the wooden ladle, brown medicinal broth dripping onto the threshold in tiny splashes. The little girl looked from the kneeling soldiers to me, lips parting as if to speak, then pressing shut again. I knew what she wanted to say. Qingwei's heart was soft. This girl I had once rescued from the roadside could never bear to see anyone beg me for help, yet she dared not open her mouth, because she knew what Shinjo had done to me. The snow fell thicker. Wind rattled the bare branches of the jujube tree at the alley's mouth. The soldiers remained kneeling in the snow, thin white powder, gathering on their armor, sinking into slush. No one moved. I regarded them in silence for a moment. Brother Song, answer one question for me. Ask, young mistress. Has the general's mansion distributed this year's winter clothing on time? Soldier Song froze, clearly not expecting the question. No, he said, voice dropping. He lowered his head, tone heavy. The western camp is still short 800 sets. The northern camp's cotton quilts haven't been gathered either. No one knows where the problem lies. Last year they arrived long before now. This year there's still no sign. The brothers are freezing so badly they have to huddle together for warmth. I asked again. What about grain and fodder? Soldier Song's head dropped lower. Grain and fodder have been cut off twice this month. And medicinal reserves? None. None at all. His voice was nearly swallowed by the wind. The medical camp is desperately short. The military doctors don't even have proper hemostatic powder left. I stood in the doorway, northern wind and snow lashing my face, cold piercing to the bone. 800 sets of winter clothing short. Grain cut off twice. Not even enough hemostatic powder. This was the result of Madame Chen managing the general's mansion for only a few months. Brother Song. I crouched down, meeting his frostbitten face. I can return to save Shinjiao's life, but I have conditions. Soldier Song's eyes lit up instantly. Whatever conditions you name, I'll agree. First, restore all logistics for grain and fodder, winter clothing, and medicinal herbs to the procedures I established last year. The Chen family stewards are to return to wherever they came from and leave military supply scheduling immediately. Second, return every land deed forcibly seized from Liujia village to its original owners within 3 days. Convert the confiscated grain into silver at market price and compensate the villagers in full. Third, I met his eyes, each word deliberate. I am not returning to stay. I am going to clean up the general's mansion's mess. Once it is done, I leave. I will save Shenjiao's life, but I need no thanks from him. I will never set foot in that mansion again, not even half a step. Soldier Song knelt in the snow, body trembling faintly. After 6 years at Shenjiao's side, he understood what these conditions meant. Shenjiao would have to draw a hard line between his newlywed wife of less than 3 months and the entire Chen family. Yet he did not hesitate. How long until you go speak with the general? He rose, legs shaking so badly they nearly buckled, yet he stood ramrod straight. Young mistress, if you are willing to return, the general will certainly agree. I don't want his verbal agreement. I want him to write it down in black and white before the entire army's officers and seal it with his general's stamp. I swept the snow from the threshold, turned, and stepped back inside the clinic. I took the cloak hanging behind the door. Qingwei immediately set down her ladle and ran into the pharmacy to pack the medicine chest swift, decisive, not a single wasted word. She wrapped surgical blades and needles in oil paper, bottled golden wound medicine, hemostatic powder, and strong liquor, then tucked a razor-sharp dagger at her waist. Within the time it takes to drink half a cup of tea, I was already mounted on the horse Qingwei had brought. I had learned to ride in the Liangzhou camp years ago, when the wounded were too numerous for carts. Shenjiao's cavalrymen had taught me after countless falls. I reined in the horse and glanced back at her. Stay in Yunzhou and watch the clinic. Do not let the medicinal porridge for the refugees at the city god temple run out. Use the formula I taught you. Qingwei stood in the doorway, one hand lifting wind-tossed hair, and nodded hard. Don't worry, big sister Tang. When you return, I guarantee not even a mouse will have slipped through. A crack of the whip and the hooves shattered the snow-packed alley. Soldier Song and his men followed. We rode out of the alley mouth, passing the crooked-necked jujube tree. Accumulated snow shook loose from trembling branches. From Yunzhou to Liangzhou, more than 200 li normally took nearly 3 days. We rode without rest through an entire night, stopping only twice in wind-sheltered mountain hollows to water the horses. We ate half-frozen flatbreads, warmed against our bodies, washing them down with snow-chilled water. At dawn the next day, the gray walls of Liangzhou City finally appeared on the horizon. The walls were the same walls, squatting on the snow plain. When I left more than 8 months ago, the outskirts had still been autumn's withered grass stretching to the sky. Now everything was blank white, even the moat frozen into lumps of ice. The guarding soldiers spotted me, stared for a long moment, then hurriedly opened the gate. Their faces held disbelief. Mouths opened and closed several times before one finally shouted, "Young mistress." It really is, the young mistress returned. I gave no reply. I spurred the horse through the gate and headed straight for the general's mansion. The street before the mansion gates looked exactly as it had when I left. The 2 lanterns at the entrance swayed in the heavy snow, their paper thick with accumulation, leaking faint red light that looked especially dim amid the swirling flakes. The main gate stood open. An unfamiliar gatekeeper dozed inside. Soldier Song leapt from his horse first and kicked the man awake. The gatekeeper opened his eyes, saw us standing in the snow with blood on our clothes, froze for a heartbeat, then scrambled inside, shouting as he ran, "The young mistress has returned." I did not enter through the main gate. I circled around to the west wing courtyard. The side door I had once unbolted myself. The door was the same door. Rust-red iron filings clung to the bolt. It creaked with familiar protest when pushed open. The west wing courtyard looked unchanged, only neglected. Snow lay unswept in the yard. Withered grass poked through. The old locust tree in the corridor had shed every leaf. Icicles hung from bare branches, swaying gently in the wind. A hole gaped in the window paper, apparently torn by wind and never patched. Bird droppings had accumulated on the sill, also uncleaned. Clearly no one had tended this courtyard since I left. Soldier Song led me straight to the easting room, where Shen Zhao lay recovering. Before we reached the door, a sharp female voice rang out from inside. "What young mistress? A woman of unknown origin. What right does she have to enter this mansion? I am the principal wife carried in through the 8-bearer sedan. I summoned the best doctors in Liangzhou City. If even I cannot invite someone, how dare she? The general is burning so badly he cannot even speak, and you bring this person to treat him. If anything goes wrong, who will bear responsibility? How many people has she even treated? She does not even run a proper medical hall." An old servant's voice murmured something placating, but the woman's voice only rose higher. Outside, the soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. I removed the medicine chest from my shoulder, calmly pushed open the east wing door, and stepped across the threshold. A brazier burned inside, warm air mixed with the scents of medicine and blood rushing forward. Chen Wanning stood before Shen Zhao's bed in a pomegranate red brocade robe, an entire set of gold hair ornaments pinned in her hair, her entire person bright and sharp. The instant she saw me, her voice cut off. Her expression shifted from anger to shock, then sank into cold fury. "So you are Guan Tong?" It was not a question. I did not answer. My gaze passed over her shoulder and landed on Shen Zhao lying in the bed. He had lost a great deal of weight, face gray-white, lips bloodless. Although the wound on his left shoulder was wrapped in gauze, seeping pus and blood had already soaked through, staining the bedding beneath a dark crimson. His eyes were closed, brows tightly knit, cracked lips moving as he muttered indistinctly. I listened for a moment and understood what he was repeating over and over. "Wantong, you've worked hard." Even in delirium, he murmured only that single phrase. Chen Wanning stood before me, the pomegranate red brocade glaring against the room's bloody atmosphere. Her gaze traveled from the top of my head down to my shoes, then back to my face. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly. That was how aristocratic young ladies looked at people, not merely with their eyes, but measuring every detail of clothing, hair ornaments, every clue to status, then assigning a price in their minds. "You are Guan Tong," she repeated, voice more certain this time, ending on a faintly superior upward lilt. "Soldier Song went to Yunzhou to invite you without my permission. The general's condition is critical. He cannot withstand outsiders of dubious origin stirring trouble." She bit the words, dubious origin, with particular clarity. I ignored her. I walked straight to Shen Zhao's bedside, set the medicine chest on the low table, opened it, and took out strong liquor and a blade. The blade gleamed coldly in the candlelight. I wiped it inch by inch from tip to hilt, with a cotton pad soaked in liquor. "What are you doing?" Chen Wanning's voice sharpened. She stepped forward, skirts sweeping the floor with a hurried rustle. Someone seize this woman. Before she finished, Soldier Song crossed the threshold and positioned himself behind me, hand on his saber hilt, gaze heavy on Chen Wanning. Several soldiers behind him followed, the clash of armor plates echoing through the room, silent, oppressive. No blades drawn, no harsh words spoken. Those few silent stares alone declared their stance. Outrageous. An old servant rushed forward from the side, shielding Chen Wanning, pointing at Soldier Song and shouting, "You coarse brutes. This is our Chen family's legitimate young lady, the principal wife of the general's mansion. Are you rebelling?" Soldier Song paid her no heed. He simply looked at Chen Wanning and said, word by word, "Madam Chen, the young mistress has come to save the general's life. He has burned with fever for 3 days and nights. Not one of the doctors you summoned dared to wield the knife. If you refuse to let her treat him and something goes wrong, will you bear the responsibility, or will the Chen family?" Chen Wanning's face drained of color. Her lips moved several times as if to speak, but her gaze fell on Shen Zhao's gray face, then swept over the soldiers standing straight-backed throughout the room. In the end, she swallowed the words on her tongue. She stepped back half a pace, covering her mouth and nose with a handkerchief, as though the bloody stench in the room offended her. I paid her no further attention. I peeled away the gauze layers from Shen Zhao's shoulder one by one. The bottommost layer had adhered to the wound. Dried pus and blood had formed a hard black-brown crust. Removing it tore away a strip of rotting flesh. Shen Zhao groaned in unconscious pain, brows knitting tighter, body twitching once. The wound sat in the hollow of his left shoulder. The arrowhead had embedded between collarbone and shoulder blade. The surrounding flesh was swollen and shiny, skin purple-black, rotting meat curled outward, yellow-green pus seeping free. The sweet stench of decay mixed with the sharp bite of liquor. The old servant behind Chen Wanning retched on the spot and clutched the doorframe to keep from collapsing. I picked up the liquor bottle and told Soldier Song, "Hold him down." The moment the liquor poured over the wound, Shen Zhao's entire body jerked upright. Fever-dazed, his eyes flew open but did not focus. A hoarse animal roar tore from his throat like a beast trapped in a snare. 2 soldiers pinned his shoulders. He struggled briefly, then his head lolled and he sank back into half-unconsciousness, lips moving in broken, indistinct syllables. "Wantang, don't go." The voice was soft. Yet in the silent room everyone heard it clearly. Chen Wanning's face turned from white to iron gray. I did not look up. I inserted 5 silver needles in sequence around the wound to stop the bleeding, then lifted the blade I had sterilized in liquor. The arrowhead's position was treacherous, wedged in the gap between collarbone and scapula, barbs hooked into tendon. Forcible extraction would sever the main vessel. I cut along the shaft, blade tip lifting away rotting flesh to expose white bone fragments and the iron-gray arrowhead embedded in the bone seam. Sweat beaded on my forehead and trickled down my temples. Qingwei was not here. No one wiped it away. I tilted my head and wiped it on the cloth at the bedside. Fresh blood welled up, soaking the gauze in my hand and half my sleeve. At some point, the space outside had filled with people's soldiers, servants, elderly retainers of the mansion, military doctors who had rushed over upon hearing the news crowded at the door and windows, craning their necks to peer inside. No one spoke. Only the faint sound of my blade slicing flesh and Shen Zhao's occasional pained groans could be heard. Chen Wanning stood in the corner, handkerchief twisted into a knot in her hands, the last trace of aristocratic composure gone from her face. Was she not Shen Zhao's principal wife? Was she not the legitimate daughter of the Chen family? Yet now everyone in the room looked not at her. The worry in the soldier's eyes at the door was not for her. The name Shen Zhao had murmured in delirium was not hers. In that moment I saw something familiar in her eyes, the humiliation of being excluded. Just as I had felt when I first saw that marriage contract. But I had no time to pity her. The blade tip had reached the base of the arrowhead. I drew a deep breath, used the back of the blade to gently press the barbed wrist, applied a precise twist, and in the collective held breath of the room, extracted the entire arrowhead along with bone fragments and shattered bone shards. Metal clinked crisply into the copper basin. The soldiers outside exhaled as one. Several men's eyes reddened on the spot. Soldier Song wiped sweat from his face, lips trembling too much to form words. Next came cleaning the wound, suturing, applying medicine, and bandaging procedures I had performed countless times, so familiar I could do them with eyes closed. By the time I tied the final knot and rewrapped the wound in clean gauze, 2 hours had passed. When I straightened, my spine cracked twice. My fingers ached so badly I could barely open them. Shen Zhao's high fever had not yet broken, but the wound no longer oozed pus and blood. The gray pallor on his face had lightened slightly. His breathing gradually steadied, cracked lips finally closed, no longer muttering those indistinct syllables. I walked to the copper basin and washed my hands. The water had gone cold. Blood had clotted into dark red flakes at the bottom. I soaked my hands and scrubbed again and again until the blood beneath my nails was gone, though my fingertips remained pale and wrinkled. Brother Song, I dried my hands and turned to the soldier standing beside the bed. The arrowhead has been removed and all rotting flesh cleared. Change the dressing once tonight and once tomorrow afternoon using the formula I left. If the fever breaks by tomorrow evening, he will be fine. If not, I draped the towel over the basin stand, folded it neatly, and set it on the rim. Then please summon other doctors from Liangzhou City. Soldier Song nodded repeatedly, but his expression stiffened the instant my words ended. He had understood my meaning. I would not stay. Once Shen Zhao's fever broke and he was stable, I would leave. Young mistress, his voice cracked with urgency. Will you not wait until the general wakes? The first thing he will do is look for you. Then let him look. I picked up the medicine chest, took the cloak from the chair back, and draped it over my shoulders. He has looked for me for 8 years already. One more time will not matter. The east wing door remained open behind me. The soldiers gathered outside parted automatically to form a path. I walked through them. When I reached the west wing courtyard, I paused, glancing back once at the room I had lived in for 8 years. The window paper was torn, snow piled on the bird droppings layered thick. The old locust tree stood bare in the yard, its trunk scar still visible, half covered by snow, revealing a blackened section. I did not linger. I strode quickly through the side door of the west wing. As I mounted my horse, hurried footsteps sounded behind me. Soldier Song chased after me, slipping and sliding in the snow, holding something aloft. Mistress, wait! I reined in the horse. He ran up, panting, and thrust the paper toward me. I looked down. It was a military order stamped with the general's seal. Written in bold black characters were 3 clauses: restore the old grain and fodder procedures. All Chen family stewards to withdraw immediately from military supply scheduling. Return every forcibly seized land deed from Liujia village to its original owners within 3 days and compensate at market price. At the bottom, Shen Zhao's general's seal and the seal of the Liangzhou military formation. The ink was still wet. The general wrote this before departing on campaign, Soldier Song gasped. He instructed me. If he did not return, this paper would stand as his life. If he did return, he paused, lifting his head to meet my eyes, voice thick. He said he would carry it out exactly as written. He simply did not have time to tell you before you left. I read the military order from beginning to end, folded it, and tucked it into my sleeve without further comment. With a flick of the reins, I spurred the horse into the swirling snow. By the time I rode out of Liangzhou's city gate, the sky had already darkened. The guarding soldiers on the watchtower called from afar, "Young mistress." Their voices tangled in the howling wind and snow. I raised a hand in farewell and, with the 2 soldiers, galloped toward Yunzhou. The snow had not stopped. If anything, it fell thicker. Northern wind drove snow pellets into my face like fine grit. The horse's breath came in great white clouds. Hooves lifted from snow and sank again with every difficult step. The outward journey had been rushed one night to Liangzhou. The return was far slower. Wind and snow were heavy. The horses were exhausted. We rested one night in a mountain hollow along the way, sheltering beneath a windbreak cliff. The 2 soldiers took turns keeping watch, while I wrapped myself in my cloak and leaned against the saddle, listening to the wind all night. At first light, the snow finally ceased. We set out again, following the half-buried official road toward Yunzhou. The wilderness on either side stretched white and empty. Not even a bird could be seen. Between heaven and earth, only the sound of hooves on snow remained. At dusk the following day, the walls of Yunzhou city finally appeared on the horizon. Fewer people queued at the gate than usual. Merchants braving the cold huddled in roadside tea stalls warming themselves by fires. I rode straight through the gate. Hooves rang crisply on the blue stone pavement, drawing sidelong glances from passers-by. The lantern at Qingwei Hall's entrance still glowed. Qingwei crouched on the threshold applying ointment to a refugee child. At the sound of hooves, she looked up. The ointment nearly fell from her hand. She rose, wiped her hands on her apron, and ran to meet me, taking the reins while looking me over from head to toe. Big Sister Tang, you're finally back. After you left, another 20-odd people arrived at the city god temple. We almost couldn't keep up with the medicinal porridge. What happened to the blood on your hands? Did General Shen? She spoke rapidly, then suddenly lowered her voice with an almost imperceptible tension. Did he come? I tossed her the reins and dismounted, flexing my frozen legs and feet. I bent to pick up the ointment she had dropped and pressed it onto the shoulder of the little girl who had already extended her arm expectantly. He came, I repeated, tone as casual as discussing the weather. The snow stopped today, so I left. Qingwei blinked, pressed her lips together, and stared at me for a moment before bursting into laughter. Big Sister Tang, this time you've truly ground General Shen's face into the dirt beneath your heel. She laughed until her eyes curved. I unstrapped the medicine chest from the horse's back and slung it over my shoulder. You saved his life yet refused to stay. He wants to thank you but has no opportunity. He wants to repay the favor but cannot. It pains him more than a knife wound. I tugged her braid. What do you know? Go inside and cook the porridge. Another month and more passed. The 12th month drew to a close. Snow in Yunzhou fell without end. Another 50 or 60 refugees arrived at the city god temple, all from the Liangzhou direction. They said the general's mansion had indeed restored the old grain and fodder procedures, but the holes left by previous chaos were too large to fill quickly. Some villagers, terrified by the ordeal, had simply packed up and left for good rather than return. Qingwei Hall's business, however, flourished. Frostbite ointment and golden wound powder had earned a reputation throughout Yunzhou City. Even merchants from neighboring Yung City came specifically to purchase stock. Qingwei led 2 newly hired young maids, grinding herbs until sweat poured down their faces. Patients lined up from morning until night. I could no longer manage alone, so I invited Dr. Meng to hold clinic half-days on alternate days. I had established myself in Yunzhou, not through any lingering favor from the general's mansion, not through anyone's pity or charity, but through these 2 hands, through jar after jar of genuine frostbite ointment, through curing illness after illness for the poor commoners. Neighbors called me Dr. Gu, some familiar aunties and grannies simply called me Tang Girl. During festivals, the alley residents would bring bowls of dumplings or plates of cured meat. At Qingwei Hall's threshold, someone often quietly left a handful of celery or a few eggs, no name attached. These things weighed far heavier than the hollow dignity piled high with silver in the general's mansion. On the evening of the 28th day of the 12th month, I was writing a prescription for the final patient when Qingwei returned from gathering firewood outside, stamping snow from her feet and shivering. Big Sister Tong, someone has arrived outside. She lowered her voice. It looks like General Shen. My brush paused, leaving a black dot on the prescription paper. Where? I asked. At the alley entrance. Qingwei set the firewood down, voice urgent yet hushed, barely containing tension. He came alone on his knees, no soldiers, not even a horse. I don't know how long he walked. His body is covered in snow, face so frozen you can barely recognize him. I finished the prescription and handed it to the patient, then rose and walked to the door. The instant I pushed it open, cold wind rushed in, setting the lantern above the door swinging wildly. At the alley entrance, a tall figure knelt in the snow. He had lost a great deal of weight. He wore only a thin dark green cotton robe, no general's uniform, no armor like an ordinary commoner. Thick snow coated his hair, his face held little color, lips tinged blue. The wound on his left shoulder had apparently not healed fully. He knelt slightly tilted to the left, as though unable to support his own weight. The moment he saw me, he looked as though something had struck him hard. His body swayed, then he lowered his head deeply, forehead nearly touching the snow. Qingwei stood behind me, tugging my sleeve. Big Sister Tong, should I drive him away? No need. I withdrew my sleeve from her grasps and stepped into the snow. Doors in the alley cracked open a sliver. Someone peeked out, then retreated. The 3 words General Shen were known to everyone in Liangzhou and Yunzhou, the man who had shed blood on the frontier for 8 years. Now he knelt in the snow of a remote alley, bowing his head to a woman who ran a small medical hall. I stopped 3 paces from him. General Shen, I said, voice neither light nor heavy, rise. The ground is cold. He lifted his head to look at me. His eyes were red but held no tears. Wan Tong? His voice was terribly hoarse, as though his throat were filled with coarse sandpaper. I did not come to beg you to return. I know you will not. I came only to say a few words. Once I finish, if you want me to leave, I will leave. I watched him, without replying. He was silent a moment, then spoke again, voice trembling. This past month I have thought everything through. 8 years ago I brought you to Liangzhou, not because I needed someone to manage the rear, but because I wanted to keep you by my side. His fingers clenched at his sides, knuckles white, veins pulsing faintly on the back of his hand. But I dared not marry you. The military rules I myself established forbid officers from marrying for personal desire, so I dared not break my own rules. I feared being accused of forgetting righteousness for beauty, feared giving others leverage. I used that damned rule as a shield for 8 years. Snow began falling again, fine flakes settling on his hair and trembling lashes. I used the rules as an excuse to let you waste 8 years in ambiguity. I thought you would never leave. I thought you would wait no matter what. I was wrong. I was despicable. His voice dropped until it was nearly swallowed by the falling snow. The day I returned and saw the empty room, saw you had taken nothing, saw the box of letters still sitting untouched on the table, I finally understood. You were not threatening me. You had truly given up on me, the kind of giving up that does not even bother to hate. He reached into his robe and drew out a letter envelope warmed damp by body heat, offering it to me. The envelope bore a line of crooked characters in his handwriting far messier than usual, as though his hand had shaken too badly to hold the brush steady. This is the last letter I will ever write from the general's mansion. You wrote to me for 8 years. I never once replied properly. This time I wrote to you. I did not take it. He tore the envelope open himself and drew out a neatly folded sheet of paper. Not letter paper, but a marriage contract. Gold-flecked red paper, gold-embossed regular script, vermilion's a seal identical to the one I had found in the study's secret compartment that day. Only the names had changed. Instead of Shen Zhao and Chen Wanning, it read Shen Zhao and Gu Wantang. My divorce agreement with Chen Wanning is already being processed, he said, holding the contract before me, arm trembling, whether from cold or something else I could not tell. She is the legitimate daughter of the Chen family. To divorce less than half a year after marriage, the Chen family will not let the matter rest. But I will handle it cleanly and ensure the Chen family causes you no trouble. Whether you wait for me or not, I will keep this marriage contract. I do not ask you to accept it now, but I want you to know one thing. In this world, there is not only that one marriage contract. Snowflakes landed on the gold-flecked red paper, blurring the gold characters. I looked at my name on that marriage contract for a long time. Then I took something from my sleeve. The military order, stamped with the general's seal that Soldier Song had pressed into my hand outside Liangzhou City. I unfolded it and pointed to the third clause, return every forcibly seized land deed from Liujia village to its original owners within 3 days and compensate at market price. I lifted my gaze to him. General Shen, has the compensation silver for Liujia village arrived? He froze, then answered. It arrived on the 20th day of the 12th month. Every household received twice the market price. What about Liangjia village? He froze again. Liangjia village 45 li north of Liangzhou City, I said evenly. In the 10th month, the Chen family steward forcibly seized winter grain from 37 households there. 2 people froze to death on the estate. Did you know? His face changed, not from guilt, but genuine ignorance. He had fought too long at the front. Upon returning, he had been injured and unconscious. He had probably not even sorted through half the mess in the rear. What about Weijia village? Baogo village? Xiaolutun? I folded the military order and returned it to my sleeve, each word falling like a stone. Every one of these villages suffered grain seizures. Your military order mentioned only Liujia village. But the villages your wife's family harmed are not limited to Liujia village. I stepped forward, closer now, close enough to see my reflection in his eyes. You said you were wrong. You said you were sorry to me. I heard all of it. But what you owe me, Shen Zhao, is not only you. What owes me is the entire aristocratic system behind you, respecting the powerful, matching doors and households, merchants being base, women disposable. It took me 8 years to crawl out of that system. You want me to return? With what? A marriage contract? A single I was wrong? I drew my cloak tighter. Snow settled on my shoulders, quickly forming a thin white layer. Go compensate every village outside Liangzhou City that suffered grain seizures. Go make the Chen family stewards vomit up every tale of military silver they swallowed these years. Go tear apart that system that divides people into 9 ranks and show it to me. When that day comes, come speak the words I am sorry to me again. I did not look at him again. I turned and walked toward Qingwei Hall. Behind me came the sound of him rising, snow crunching underfoot. He took 2 steps forward, then stopped, as though some force had pinned him in place. Wantong. His voice drifted in the snow, yet every word seemed squeezed from his chest. Even if you never forgive me, I accept it. But remember what I said today. I will keep this marriage contract for a lifetime. My steps did not slow. I pushed open the door of Qingwei Hall. Qingwei stood inside, still clutching the wooden ladle for stirring porridge. She looked at my face, then at the figure still standing in the snow at the alley entrance. Her mouth opened and closed several times before she finally managed. Big Sister Tang. The porridge is ready. Then served 2 bowls. I hung my cloak on the hook behind the door, washed my hands in the copper basin, and sat behind the long consultation table. I opened today's unfinished prescription notebook. 1 bowl for yourself, 1 for me. Extra ginger. Qingwei carried the porridge over. I accepted the bowl and held it in both hands. The warm porcelain pressed against my palms, slowly melting the chill I had brought back from the snow. Outside, the window snow continued to fall. Qingwei glanced out while holding her own bowl and muttered, "This snow looks like it will last until tomorrow." "Let it fall," I said, blowing on the steam rising from the surface. "No matter how heavy, it cannot break the jujube tree's branches." That night, Yunzhou City received another full night of goose feather snow. At first light the next morning, I pushed open the clinic door. No one remained at the alley entrance, only 2 faint knee prints in the snow, half covered by fresh flakes, their outlines still vaguely visible. Qingwei took a broom to clear the snow at the entrance, and stared at those prints for a long while. When she returned, she said, "Big Sister Tang, he's gone." I flipped the medicinal herbs over and spread them anew, then sat back behind the consultation table and opened a fresh page of the prescription notebook. I lifted my brush and wrote the date, 48th year of Qianyuan, first day of the first month. Sunlight filtered through the window paper, falling across the page and across the hand that held the brush.